Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Drawing Down the Stars. And we're the Occult Explorers, and I'm joined today with my good friends Ryan and Dion. How's it going, guys?
Life is beautiful.
Nice
This
mustache.
caterpillar just this caterpillar just crawled onto my top lip and died. So I'm just like keeping it here before I can go and bury it.
Wild.
Wait a minute. Before we begin, I've got to take it off, right?
Here comes the magic trick, the reveal, the prestige.
Oh!
And there's a mustache underneath, like a true magician.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Falling Down the Stairs, the Occult Explorer Inspiration Society.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. We're the Occult Explorers, and today we're here to dig into the magic of King Solomon. So this is kind of funny because after we did the Krampus episode, we had a bit of a Christmas break, and we ended the Krampus episode kind of recognizing, at least in my area of the slides, when I got to the end of my presentation, it was this revelation that the Krampus myth is really connected to the myth of the magician, and that it's really this Christian magical summoning and binding of demons, and it's connected to a lot of this Solomonic magic in a very deep intrinsic way, right? And so I was like, this is where we need to go next when we're exploring this dragon tongue. This is the next logical place, is to examine this key archetype of Solomon, because this is a figure, while it originates in the Jewish mythology and folklore, it is kind of everywhere. He becomes sort of, by the late 3rd century, the most prominent magician and sort of the atypical magician. So what are your thoughts on King Solomon, Ryan?
Yeah, exactly as you said. We were just saying before the program began that we see as partly Persian, Babylonian, that kind of area, partly Egyptian, and then an amalgamation. And if you see where the actual story,
Chaldean magic thrown in there too, and yeah, Greek magic. It's kind of synthesizing all of it into a key kind of figure. You know,
what surprised me about it is I've read over it all again. I've studied this stuff before, but how much of a fairy tale it all is, and how I wondered how something that is so much of a fairy tale from the beginning could actually enter into the official canon of a somewhat serious religion that states that its canon is true. You know, there are other religions that have these kind of stories, and they go, yeah, okay, it's just a story. But here, right, as with the Jesus character, it's put across as being true. I find that quite surprising.
That is interesting. What I also found quite surprising when I started to look into this, I found a couple of books that were diving deep, and you see this image everywhere. He's a central key element, like in the Arabian Nights. Like his magic is what seals the genie in Aladdin's lamp, right? Like there's like the key things where this Solomon figure just keeps showing up and appearing all across all of this magic and all of this folklore. You know, Aladdin's Chinese originally too, right? So like,
is that true?
Yeah, the figure of Aladdin in the Arabian Nights, the original version, he's a Chinese character, right?
Oh, yeah. Learn something new. Well, I was thinking as well, like just the lineage of the magic going into Europe. You know, the non-pagan. Well, it does have pagan elements clearly, but like it comes through the Templar. You know, they're the poor knights of Christ and Solomon and the temple and all that stuff, and then it gets to Rosicrucianism and the Arthurian myths, and it just completely bleeds in. Solomon himself might not show up, but that same thread. Again, kind of a more Persian version of it into the Arthurian tales.
What we start to see when I started to dive deep into the history of the transmission of a lot of this stuff is that while you do see it within like the Testament of Solomon, which in my slide we'll be diving deep into, is the 2nd century text. And it has been slightly Christianized, but it's very clearly a Jewish text, right? Talking about a Jewish magician. But what we get later, though, is by the 3rd century, 4th century, but and is that the Christians start to adopt this imagery. And then with the rise of Islam, this is where things get really wild, because in Islam they really adopted the figure of King Solomon, and there's all this mythology. Like I found one of the caliphs, this Caliph Harun, claimed to have had Solomon's emerald tablet, which we know is a key image in Hermeticism as well. So there's like all of these parallels of ideas too. Like, where does this idea of an emerald book originate now, right? Because Solomon has his own version of an emerald book, right? Is this an allusion to the Hermetic book, or is it something different? I don't know. It was a weird synchronicity that I found. But the key is that, like you said, it's when the Templars go to do the Crusades, they come into contact with this Islamic, Solomonic magical tradition. And that's where we get the birth of modern grimoires. Like, it's coming out of that Picatrix sort of lineage, you know?
Yeah. And the Druze have Solomon as well. Yeah. It's all very, very, it's not even confused. He's clearly an icon. That's what he is. He's somebody like Hermes. He can absorb all these ideas into himself. You know, Solomonic magic goes all the way up to the Masons and through to the Golden Dawn, and it stays there because it is the easily accessed version of the Egyptian, mostly Egyptian tradition of summoning spirits for the Western ears. You know, there's enough common touchstones there for us to be able to assimilate it.
It's really interesting is like when I started to dive into the more magical stuff, there is kind of a separation that happens where, there is a bit of a bleeding in, but then there's a clear deviation over time, where what happens is originally you have this sort of Alexandrian, we'll call it, magical tradition, where it's that Greco-Egyptian magic. And then the Christian stuff and the Yao stuff starts to come in. And the Yao stuff gets immediately adopted, and some of the Christian bleeds in, like some Christian sacred names. But the Yao magic that we see with King Solomon is all about the names of God, specifically about the evocation of names. Whereas within the earlier Greco-Roman tradition, it's the barbarous words, which are also names of God, but they're slightly different. You know, the Hebraic names have words behind them. They have roots and meanings, where the Greco-Roman ones, the meaning has either been lost through time or there never was one. It's a babbled word, right?
Yeah, there are hints at God names, though, in lots of those babbles of words, aren't there?
Of course, and this is where it gets so confusing, is because you'll have Adonai in the middle of a babbled Alexandrian word, right? Like, it all becomes intermixed. But what we start to see is that a lot of that earlier Greco-Alexandrian tradition starts to fall out of form, and this Solomonic tradition starts to become more centralized, though some elements of that Greco-Roman tradition an Egyptian tradition become incorporated, mainly the magical seals and sigils, right?
Which takes you to your characteres that you were studying in Dragon's Talk.
Exactly, and the characteres, the drawing of these protective seals and the wearing of those magical amulets, right? They change again. When we were looking at them with the chakrateres, right? It was all about wearing the phylactery, which is a form of magical armor that you would have pressed on tin or gold and you'd wear over your heart. In the Christian tradition, it becomes the Masonic ring, the Solomonic ring, and where you have the sigil of Solomon. And you see this early in the Islamic tradition as well, the Solomonic ring. And that sort of supplants the phylacteries. Though you'll still see them around and stuff. None of this stuff from the Greco-Roman completely goes away. It just becomes more supplanted by this Christian invoking of names and this image of the Solomon as this commanding of demons. No longer are you making pacts with demons. No longer are you bribing demons, or working with demons. Now you're commanding them through the name of God, Well,
I think that's for two reasons. One of them is that word itself became Christianized and didn't mean what it had meant. The diamonds and these spirits, they were the good and bad. They didn't, it depended. Whereas as you get to this Christian era, they have more of a bad connotation. However, it is pretty obvious when you read things like the Testament of Solomon what's going on with these demons, but I'll hold on to that until we get into the meat of it.
But now, Dion, what is your perspective on King Solomon? Because what was interesting too is when I brought up this idea to do the episode, I mentioned it to Dion, and Dion's like, "That's where I was going. I've already been doing research all over Christmas break, and we didn't even plan for it." You know?
Oh, I did. I've said it a few episodes ago. I said we should do Solomon.
You did.
You probably forgot. Yeah.
You did, but it wasn't in relation to the dragon tongue stuff. This was, you wanted to show, I remember Neil, you wanted to show Neil something with the sacred geometry.
Oh no, that wasn't Solomon. But yeah, no, I'd planned to do this basically. I think we've all had different ideas of the same thing.
Pretty much. But what's your angle and your take? Because I know you've been doing your own independent research here, Dion.
As a continuation of the dragon, let's say, or dragon's tongue, where we're coming from, Saint Nick being a type of a dragon, a type of a Solomon. And you said something earlier that there's a thread, that you see a thread of continuity. Let's call it the scarlet thread.
Are you referring? Oh my God!
And I know the thread will be part of the sub theme to trace this wizard stuff. So if you could hit the first pick, and we'll get started.
Oh wow! Okay, here we go. Let's pull it up.
The red dragon. Getting into that red dragon symbology. We talked about the red dragon in the past episodes. And this deals with Solomon. This is one of these grimoires where you could look up these chakra and different symbols and evoke demons or to control demons. There's a lot of speculation as to when it was published, in the 1400s, 1700s. It's part of a body of work that explores what you guys have just been talking about, controlling demons through magical words and spells and symbols. So you would go for that. Let's say, let's go to dragon school or wizard school. If you could hit the next pick. Can you go one more picture? Let's see. All right, right there. I want to show you this picture right here. It's hard to say that word on the left, but I'll say the one on the right. Solomonic.
Is it scholomance, as in scholastic magic?
Yes, exactly. And this is from Romania. Now we're in Romania, where we'll start the trip from, or start the journey off. And these are dragon riders. They're called that's called a storm dragon right there. And the person riding it is a solomonic, which is a former Romanian wizard that could control these weather dragons. There is a comparison in trace in mythology where they had something that were called smoke treaders, or those who walk in the clouds. And it deals with weather dragons and lightning. And this is a part of the red dragon stuff.
Sorry, bud. This is why you go first. The first thing you pull up, no one's ever heard of. It's amazing. How do you do it? I don't get it. It's like we can talk about Solomon. This Jewish fella. Oh, Romania. He's in Romania.
Well, because that's what they call the wizards there, the Solomonic. And it deals with Solomon and commanding demons to bid to do your work. Weather dragons at that. That's a big part of it. And we've been saying that in a lot of episodes. Can you go back one picture now? All right. And so part of when they choose the Solomonics to go to that school, the Scholomance, which is in Transylvania, it was a school of black magic. They pick kids because they have a knot on their head. Like Buddha. Remember we talked about the Buddha knot, and people think it's a top knot, but Buddha in some traditions has an elongated skull or a knot on his head as a symbol of a divine being. And those are the wizards there in Romania, and it's part of the mythology there. Like right there is a stamp, and you can see that's where his name is, Fought Frumos. And he's a famous one of these heroes that defeats dragons. We've talked about that mythology and a lot of the history. And not only would you defeat a dragon, but you get a princess. And you see the princess in the background, Elena. You could see her just standing there. And on the one on the right is a children's novel based on him, where he's slaying a red dragon. And you notice he's wearing that red and white symbology, which we're talking about in a lot of these episodes, which is that little champignon, the ongos. So let's go to a couple pictures and go one more. Boom. And so since we're talking about Transylvania and Romania, let's talk about Vlad #1 on the left.
A red dragon, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was part of that red dragon cult.
Yeah, the Order of the Dragon, which is he was brought in by Sigismund, and this is Vlad's father, Dracula's father, because Dracula meaning son of a dragon, the dragon's son. Yeah, and so part of the Order of the Dragon, red and white was part of the symbologies, that scarlet thread of the red robes. And you can see here, the one in the middle, that little symbol, that's of Lady Bathory. If you've seen those, heard those myths about Lady Bathory, that was her symbol with the dragon in the red and white. And Alphonse of Aragon on the right, red and white with his red dragon. So go to the next image. So let's go to his kid, Dracula, son of a dragon, the dragon's son, brought into the Order of the Dragon. Radu. We've talked about Radu, his brother. People don't know about Dracula's brother, Radu. Radu the Beautiful, Radu the Fair. They were kidnapped by the Sultan in the middle, Mehmed. He's in red and white also. And what happened was he kidnapped them and held them hostage. But he taught them things, grimoires, a lot of different things, and at a certain point, Vlad gets taken back, but Radu wants to stay with the Sultan there. And there's a little more to that story, which we've talked about in other episodes. And there's poetry that evolves out of that. We've talked about the poetry as well. Pretty wild poetry. So I just want to throw that in there, this continuity. So boom, let's go to the next picture.
The King of England. The King of England is a direct descendant of Vlad Tepes, and he's still part of the Order of the Dragon.
Yeah, and he's rebuilding some of the stuff in Transylvania. He's bought properties and wants to rebuild. And speaking of that king there, this is what he would wear as this little symbol right here. This is the Order of the Garter of St. George, the Dragon Slayer. Piercing the dragon through the mouth, through the tongue, which is symbolic of a mushroom sometimes. The angle, the elliptical angle, if we know about the Earth's orbit and precession. The colors in there, red and white and blue, also on the horse. There's a lot of different mythologies that we've unpacked before. But one reason I want to talk about the Order of the Garter is a certain member of the Order of the Garter. Go to the next image. Yeah, that's Haile Selassie right there.
The Emperor of Ethiopia?
That's right. He was brought into the Order of the Garter, and you can see right there as a dragon slayer. And he has his other orders as well that he was called the Cordon of. One is called the Order of Solomon, the other one is called the Order of the Seal of Solomon. And they believe him to be a direct descendant of Solomon through Queen Sheba, and him having a ring with the Lion of Judah on it that was passed down. And there's in different verses or different books, they talk about that ring being passed down. And so for the let's say the works I had to go to for this one, people say I don't state the sources. I went to the Bible, Midrash, Apocrypha, Nag Hammadi, Quran, the Bible, Josephus. There's a bunch, the Testament of Solomon, Song of Solomon. There's a bunch of different things you got to go to unpack Solomon. So right here, Rastafari, and that's a whole nother episode if we got into that right there. As a dragon slayer, go to the next image. And I want to show you this right here. That's the seal for the Order of the Seal of Solomon, which he would wear on his robe. And not only does it have the star in the middle where the cross is, but on the edges, we have what's called the Seal of Melchizedek, which is the 4 and the 4. Not the two triangles. I'm talking about the outer edge, which is also part of these seals for binding demons. And so Solomon is considered the heir. I mean, Haile Selassie is considered the heir dependent coming down through Sheba, because Sheba went back to Ethiopia. And at a certain point, even in, let's say, Israeli history, Jewish history, they're called the Falasha, Beta Israel. They're airlifted to Ethiopia, part of the calling back of the people. And they still have problems there today, though. That's why they're called Falasha, I mean others are foreigners. So they're not fully accepted, let's say. And so there's a lot of debate over that. But I just want to point this out in terms of tracing down Solomon.
Well, that Ethiopian line is really interesting. They even claim to have the Ark of the Covenant, which they claim to have smuggled out of Israel during when they left, in order to protect it. And
what's interesting about that, if you just let me put it in quickly, they have a keeper of that Ark of the Covenant, and every single one of them goes blind within about 2 years. So whatever they're guarding, it's making them blind.
Wild. I know they also have to be pure virgins and all this in order to guard it. They get super intense about it, you know. And then the Rastas don't believe, like, so Haile Selassie, right, is such an interesting, important, historical, powerful figure. He was the only colonial ruler to resist European imperialism. He managed to defeat the Italians. And because of this, he fell into all of these New World, sort of like Caribbean and American prophetic new religious movements and ideas, right? A lot of people took the words of, even though Marcus Garvey wouldn't describe himself as a prophet, people took his words prophetically. And he said that when a king could rise in Africa, that the African people would be free. And the Rastas took this rising, the sign of Haile Selassie defeating the Italians, as a sign of his divinity, as a sign that he was the chosen king, and that Marcus Garvey was a prophet. And they don't believe that Haile Selassie was killed when the communists invaded, because eventually that's what happened is communists overthrew his government and Haile Selassie was killed. But the Rastas do not believe this. They believe that Haile Selassie escaped and he is living in the mountains as a monk somewhere in Ethiopia, waiting for the apocalypse to come, acting out as Magi.
Now, so who were the communists?
Well, they're just like Ethiopians, local Ethiopians. Right. You know, they were trying to gain their own. They were backed by Russians, right? Because it's all imperial politics and games. You know, and when they couldn't overthrow him by war means, they overthrew him by causing an uprising. And that communist thing didn't last in Ethiopia very long. So it's all wild.
Question: You heard of the myth of when Haile Selassie landed in Jamaica and the crows, all the black crows ascended? Well, we'll talk about that later when we talk about the last line in Song of Solomon. So boom, let's go to the next image.
I also want to point out that there was with that crow thing, he was also said to have had the stigmata. And Rita Marley is one of the people who claims to have seen this. He waves, and they said he had the wounds of Christ upon his hand, and this was one of the magical signs. Anyway, lots of interesting stuff with Haile Selassie, and a super important figure.
So we know that Queen Sheba hooked up with Solomon at a certain point. How did it happen? Well, it happened through a little bird. The one on the left is a peacock, and this is the image of a peacock in Solomon, and it's based on a whole nother folktale. And look, he's red and white like a mushroom, which we're not going to go into that one. I want to go into the one on the right, which is which is a bird sitting in the trees. You can barely see it. It's called a hoopoe bird. And that bird is how Solomon learned about Sheba. Because one day, because he had his birds, he controlled birds because he could talk to birds, and didn't come home. They're all supposed to show up at the same time, and he was mad. And he even says, "I'm gonna kill that bird when it gets back." And it comes back late, and he says, "Nah, there's a reason." He goes, "I found this famous queen who's intelligent and has many riches, and treasures and gold." And he's like, "Oh, tell me about her. I'd like to meet her. Like, send her this letter." He goes, "Well, she worships the sun." And he's like, "Nah, we want her to worship our God." So he starts communicating through Sheba, through the bird. Now, this is in a lot of myths. They talk about this. And it's big in Islamic myths, the Quran, they talk about it. But one is in Iran, that bird, because it's a special looking bird, it's called scalloped head. And the myth comes from this myth in that there was a daughter one day who was combing her hair, and the father walked in the room and saw her unkempt, undressed, and she jumped out of the window with the comb stuck in her hair. And she died that way and became born with this bird that had a scalloped head. Now, the comb and the hair goes back to those other episodes we've been talking about. All right. So he starts communicating to Sheba through the bird, and eventually she wants to come to meet him. So she goes to Solomon's temple. And go to the next image. And that's where you get into some wild stuff. If you get into the Midrash, the Quran, part of it, there's riddles. There's a series of riddles. But first, when she goes to meet him, he has a glass floor. You might have heard of this famous glass floor he had at the temple. And she thought it was water. So she picks up her skirt, not to get her skirt wet, and goes to step on the glass water. And she figures out it's a trick, or that he has a glass floor. But when she does that, Solomon notices that she has hairy legs. And so there's a lot of myths and folktales that talk about these hairy legs. It gets wild. And in one of the myths, at the end of it, because they do these riddles, and finally he tricks her, or he has the answers to the riddles, and they fall in love and they go to mate. But he says, I cannot get with you unless you deplete the hair on your legs.
Well, I will note that all those riddles were about sex and gender and children, and they're all quite raunchy, aren't they? Like, can you spot a female amongst these children? And
yeah,
you know,
which one's circumcised? How can you tell which one's circumcised and all this stuff? And part of the thing is, Solomon only got in trouble with God for one thing: women, because he had over 700 wives and concubines, and that was his thing. And so in this particular manuscript, you can see, though, he's in red and white. Once again, she's dark as an Ethiopian, and she's standing up because she has equality. She's not his slave. In some of the versions, she's equal. In other versions, he subdues her and tricks her and all this stuff. But eventually, she goes back to Ethiopia, and she takes a ring with her, and that's the ring that we were talking about that has a symbol of Judah on it. And, you know, in this ring, in other mythologies, or in the other books, that's how he subdues the demons. Now, part of it is this. See what I'm doing right here? It's called to give someone the finger. That was the finger he'd wear it on, and that was how he would command him, was through this. That's why this has a bad name up to this day. That ring finger, giving someone the finger, it's part of it. That's how he controlled them. Now, this ring, go to the next image.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. And so we're going to unpack his ring a little bit. But to do that, I want to go to Asia, where they have tales of Solomon's ring in Asia as well, through the Quran. And this one, this is a Brahmin. Now, in this particular manuscript, there's a dragon being subdued up there, a snake. And that snake is Buddha in one of his forms. And that's an evil Brahmin subduing him with this thing. You see it on his hand, that fan with the symbol? On the symbol.
It's that same symbol.
Yeah, Solomon's symbol. And he has it tattooed on his knee down there at the far left. And he has a basket right there that he's going to try to subdue him into the basket to put the genie in the bottle. Now, these genie in the bottles are the peacock in the bottle. A lot of this is alchemy with salt, mercury, and sulfur, if we really got into it, but that's a whole nother episode. But, you know, in this one, it's wild. It's that same symbol as subduing them, you know, with the finger. And the thing is, these demons can be controlled to do things. That's how Solomon built his temple.
Yeah.
You know, part of it, he used a worm called Shamir. Was a worm that would eat. It was like a snake that would eat the stone and shape it. And he had all these gemstones and stuff. Go to the next image. So boom, right there. So now we're kind of getting into the Testament of Solomon a little bit and controlling these demons and dragons. Right here, a red dragon. This right here is from Russia, though. Slavic three-headed dragon. Because in the Testament of Solomon, I think there is a three-headed dragon called the Crest of Dragons. Yeah. And that's the leader of them. And I think there's 7 dragons total.
2.
2.
Yeah, 2.
Okay, and then I know there's something with the 7 water pots that have demons, water demons in. 7 sisters, all this weird stuff in the different books combined, these mythologies. Even in the Nag Hammadi, that's what I'm talking about. The 7 water bottles come from the Nag Hammadi. Right. Now, with these bottles, to put a genie in the bottle, consider it a wine flask, a leather wine flask, or a skin bottle. Not necessarily glass or vase or basket, but a skin bottle, a meat suit. There's a lot more to the story. But so these demons that you control, part of controlling them to build his temple, it wasn't just him. It was somebody else. Go to the next image. Hiram of Beast. Hiram of Tyre. We talk about Tyre and all those episodes that deal with the kings of Tyre and the rituals they had to go through and the burning purple and all the weird different things. Well, in Masonic lore, they consider Hiram of Tyre, the widow's son, Hiram of Tyre, the widow's son, as one of the central figures in Masonic mythologies. Because I'm going to incorporate that, because that's where a lot of the Solomonic stuff ends up. To this day, if you join a Masonic lodge, you're going to learn about King Solomon. That's central to the whole, mythology that they're teaching.
Mostly
the way that
through Hiram.
There's Hiram right there in red and white on the left. 2 poles. Got the red and white. That could be
I'll get into that later.
Boaz and Joachim. There's all kinds of different ways to unpack this. But where I'm going with it is the sets of 3. All right, in the top right corner, we have Saint Nick. We talked about Saint Nick resurrecting the kids that were fermented. The 3 kids, the 3 boys, and the 3 prostitutes with those cakes or the coins, suppositories or seals. The bottom, we have the angel that saved Shadrach in the book of Daniel, the 3 kids that are put in the oven. Well, it's 3 ruffians that kill Hiram. And it deals with Jabal, Jubilam. They got these little secret codes. They talk about Jabalon. And so this is from a Masonic manual in the middle. So
Do you have an answer for that, for those 3 are?
I'll let you talk about that later.
Okay. Well, I'll say it now because it's not really part of my presentation. I'll say it briefly. It's can't remember which 3 it is. I'm pretty sure it's like Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricorn, because they're the ones that kill the sun. Those are the last months of the year. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
National theology. Love it. So go to the next image. So we're talking about the series of 3 and how this is in the Bible, and this goes back to Solomon, because we're talking about lineages, ancestors. And these are Solomon's ancestors, let's say. Here's Noah in red and white with the red robe with the 3 sons. And there's the mythology. You go in the Bible talking about the finger. They pull his finger and it comes off. Remember the finger we're talking about? The bone thing, Mahabone. And that's in the Masonic books too. They talk about that stuff.
I'm dying, son. Pull my finger.
Yeah. And it's filled with trying to get that information, that secret information. That's what they wanted. Just so you know, I didn't tell you why they killed Hiram Abiff in the Masonic folklore. It's because there's 3 guys come to him and they want the information, the secret codes of Solomon, the word. What's the magic word? The dragon stuff. And he won't tell them, so they kill him, but they kill him with tools. They kill him with the crescent and the compass. They kill him with the compass stang, with one of the shovel things, with a trowel. And so these are like tools, builder's tools. And it's a secret to making these builder's tools work. So go to the next image, because that one dealt with Noah and Noahide law, the 7 Noahide laws. So from there, I want to get into, because we're talking about King Solomon and where he comes from. We'll start here with I'll go to Jacob, because before we talked about the porridge, Esau and Jacob, where he tricks his brother into drinking red porridge for his birthright.
Oh yeah.
To become the leader of Israel, because the older brother usually has the birthright. This is how it works. But the younger brother tricks him with the red porridge. This is the scarlet thread in the drinking of the red porridge. Tricks him, but he has to fulfill that with his father, which is Isaac. And his father's blind. And he goes, well, Esau's hairy and has red hair. And so what they do is they slaughter a goat and they put a goat skin on Jacob, and he goes to see his father, and his father touches his hairy skin. And it deals with the hair. That's part of it. I was talking about the hairy legs and the hairy skin. And he gets the birthright at that point to become the leader. Now we go forward, and you remember he got with Rachel and Leah, the sisters. And one sister gives her mandrake to sleep with the husband. We talked about that in another story. So where I'm going forward with this is to get to Judah, who has his 3 sons. And this is a whole nother episode that's based on this stuff. Hang on 1 second. I'll be back in 1 second.
Wild. There's always that 3 imagery.
Yeah, well, it was like the Noah was like Shem, Ham, Farash. I think Solomon has 2. I might be wrong on that though. Yeah, the 3. It's back to that cardinal, fixed, and mutable for me. Whenever you see the 3, it's like what has been, what is currently, and what's coming, kind of an idea.
The 3 always implies generation, right? 3 and the 9, 3, 6, 9. Those Tesla numbers.
Yeah, Tesla numbers.
Yeah.
Vortex
All
maps,
right.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Sorry about that. My roommates came home. So yeah. So where I was going with this is Judah, because we're talking about the ring of Judah and how this connects to Solomon. Judah in red and white right there. He had 3 sons, and there was a slave lady that was going to get married to the son, and he didn't like her, so God punished him. One of the 3 sons. The second son went to get with her and says, "I won't touch her. I'd rather spill my seed on the ground," is what it says in the Bible. And so God punishes him too. Then there's the third son, which Judah promises her to the third son, and then he lies, so it doesn't happen. So she figures out a way to do something because she's inspired by God. And what she does, she dresses up as a prostitute. Her name is Tamar, like where they get the name Tamara. And she dresses up as a prostitute, and Judah comes and he sees her. And he goes, "Oh, hey, what's up?" and wants to get with her. He has no money. What does he tell her? "I'll give you a goat." He goes, "When we're done, I'll have my friend bring a goat to you, one of my slaves." And she goes, "No, I want your ring." And he goes, "Okay." So he gives her the ring. So she sleeps with them and then takes that ring and she goes into hiding. Later on, she becomes pregnant. And even before that, he sends that slave out to find her. You know where he goes to take the goat to find her at first? It's at the shrine, because he thinks that she's a temple prostitute at that. It says that in the Bible. And so he can't find her, and eventually she shows up pregnant. And she produces the ring. And she produces that ring, and when she produces the ring, they know that
Who's had his way with her?
yeah, she's the heir. And so that's Jacob. So a son is born, and this is where I'm going with the story. She has twins. And when she goes to give birth to the twins, a baby sticks his arm out the womb. And the midwife ties a red cord around the baby's arm. Go to the next picture. I think I got a representation of it. Yeah, this is in what you'll see in a lot of Kabbalistic stuff. And yeah, different people will put that red thread, and that's because of this myth. And so what it is Perez sticks his hand out, and they put a red thread on it. He puts his hand back in, and then the other baby comes out, the older baby, which always should be the one that gets the birthright. But because of that red thread, they're saying no, this baby is the one, and it deals with older birthrights. And there's even more to this red thread. Remember, I was talking about the scarlet thread, where we're going. Yeah. There's another one where there's what's it? Rob, I think is the name, and she waves. This is in the Song of Solomon. She puts a scarlet rope out the window. Go to the next image. I think I got it there. Yeah, there it is. And it's from Joshua, actually. Tie the cord of scarlet thread in the window and gather to yourself in the house of your father's household. And so she puts this scarlet rope or scarlet thread out the window. And what this does, this deals with, it gets symbolic. We'll get more into it. Go to the next image. Here it is, the Song of Solomon. I was talking about that. Here where it says, your lips are like a scarlet ribbon, or like a scarlet thread. And so there's more to this scarlet thread in Solomon. And even more in the phrase, it talks about behind your veil is like a slice of pomegranate. Because we're going to get into the pierced veil and the idea of the veil, of the head cover.
The brow, they're talking about the third eye, aren't they? That's like the Jewish way of saying the third eye when they say brow, as far as I know.
Love it.
And that pomegranate is always representative of that forbidden fruit, that knowledge.
Opium.
Well,
if you look at opium and you look at pomegranates, you know, I found a lot of the places that have opium pomegranate on the flag, for example, are usually have the heavier crops of opium growing in those countries.
Well, so within a lot of within the Hera and the Persephone myth, it's a clear allusion to some kind of sacrifice, right? Mm-hmm. Eating of the flesh, consuming of the blood. If you rip apart a pomegranate, it's the same thing like ripping apart an animal. And that was the central rite within these Masonetic rites, the sparagmos, where they would rip a live animal apart, you know? Wildness.
Can you imagine? That's
you got to be on some serious mushrooms to rip a live animal apart.
Right.
You know, and if you read in Euripides, the Bacchae, right, the mother rips apart Pentheus, her own son, not even recognizing him, thinking it's an animal under the madness of Dionysus. And he's dressed up as a woman.
Transport this Dionysus. I get my hands on him.
Well, Dionysus
I'll tear him
is
a
very
new one
wild.
again.
All right, let's
Sorry,
continue.
Dion.
Oh,
This
okay.
is fascinating, by the way.
Oh, next image, please. So if we're talking about this line of Solomon, the thread, we're trying to look at the scarlet thread of continuity and where he comes from, David, because we're looking at whose father is whose father and that. And we got David, who comes from this other lineage. And right here we have Goliath, who you can even see, even though they're making him a giant, look at his armor, is scaly like snake skin, like a dragon skin, and he has a scalped red thing on his head. Because in some parts of the version, he's a dragon. It's a tall, snaky thing. And David has to kill him with what? The sling. The thing you spin, the jinx. That's how he kills him. That thing you spin, and on it is a rock or a piece of lead that has a symbol on it that's been carved on it. Just like, people talk about the tablets or, the 10 Commandments. Those are on stones, like dreidels, carved dreidels, gemstones. So he has like a stone, and he would spin this thing, and that's how he kills the giant dragon Goliath, who is a dragon in some versions. And we talked about this spinning before, the whip as a tool, as a toy. There's just a lot going on there with David. And so, because he's Solomon's father, so we got to talk about his father. Where does he get all this stuff from? The ark, and how the ark happened. Because there's one story where David dances naked in front of the ark. You've heard of that one, or in the loincloth. And it's like that same loincloth we talk about. The loincloth that the kid ran away with, like the sindon. This is different. It's an ephod. It's not a sindon, but still there's some stuff with it.
Why was he dancing naked in front of the ark?
Some people say he was high. His wife, Michael, gets mad. She gets mad at him and says, "You've disgraced yourself because your loins were showing in front of the ark. You were dancing in front of her and rejoicing that the power came home." But let's hit the next symbol, or the next image. And this is David once again in a little red and white there. And this is the story of Abishag, because it goes once again to birthright, to who's older, and getting birthrights and dealing with Solomon and David and all these people. Her role in the Bible was they found her and they brought her, and her role was just to stay between his legs when he slept, his loins, to keep him warm, because he couldn't keep warm. It said that they would put a bunch of blankets, and it couldn't keep him warm no matter how many blankets they put. So they found this woman to keep him warm. But in some of the myths, it says she's a fire tender. It's like a form of shamanism. Deals with keeping people warm.
Asterion.
Yeah. And that's where they got her from. And talking about this, it deals with the Persian stuff and the fire mythologies, and even the certain words in the Septuagint to describe these different situations. And we're going to get into this in Song of Solomon, the thera root, where you get theriac, but they're using it as in therma to heat, but as a head covering or a sickle and different things. It's a weird way to use it. And so this is how it's introduced into the story, as her job is to thera him.
Well, this is really interesting. It makes me think of also the Greek goddess Hestia, right? The sacred virgin who tends the hearth and who is the embodiment of the hearth, which is the seat of political discourse in the city, right? Where the king has to go and light his hearth, and you have all those stories about the sacred phallus in the hearth, right?
Well, the thing is, it says she remains a virgin. He doesn't sleep with her. It says though she stays between his loins, he doesn't have sex with her. Right.
This is an allusion to that Hestia imagery. Those, not just the Zoroastrian fire tender, but like this is something that's super, super ancient. Like the earliest Greek cities, anytime they would establish a new city, you had to first make the Prytaneum, which was a temple to Hestia, was a common hearth. And you would light the fire from that original Prytaneum in Greece. And so each of these new cities was connected to that original city. And you had that burning flame, that goddess Hestia is present, and before you could do any political discourse, you had to engage and make offerings to that flame first. She is a huge power source for kings, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
this is what it is, right? Like this is where King David's gaining his power from her, having her tending his fire, right?
Yeah,
Just like the
exactly.
Vestal Virgins,
So
like
is
King
that
Numa's
like,
daughters were the Vestal Virgins, you know?
is that, do you find that to be like in the homemaking sense, in a, not just the home, but like in a statecraft kind of a manner? What do you see?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, because Hestia is in the mythology, she's also the exact polar opposite to Hermes, right? And there's this weird kind of thing where they're possible lovers, even though she's that eternal virgin, you know, because she is closed in the home. She represents that purity. She represents honor and duty and diligence. And Hermes is the exact opposite. He's the trickster who's in movement and all of this stuff. And they wind up playing this really interesting dichotomy. And in some of the later Roman mythology, right, you can connect Hestia to the goddess as Diamuta, Tacita, right? And in that story, Diamuta speaks up to Jupiter because Jupiter's going to rape her sister Juturna, who's a nymph. And so she speaks up and tells on Hera, and for this, Jupiter rips her tongue out and casts her into the underworld, but has Hermes, Mercury, bring her to the underworld, and they fall in love with each other and make love, and then she becomes the mother of the Lares, the daimonic spirits.
Get in, Hermes. Go on, son.
Yeah.
So here, would you say, as far as this Solomonic thing goes, so she's a virgin and she's keeping his balls warm, as it were. She's keeping his home warm.
Yeah.
So she's like almost like the power behind the throne kind of an idea.
That's what's gonna happen in the rest of the story, is that she becomes a political pawn in the throne over birthright of which brother is older, because Solomon, this is the father of Solomon right here, David, had another son named Adonijah, like Adonai Jah, like Jah Rastafari. You know, you get all those words together.
Rastafari.
Yeah, and he was older, and he was expected, it was his birthright to be the king, but they wanted to pick Solomon for some weird reason. And guess what? Go to the next image. So, and even there, I'll go one more image, and we'll see if we have. Was that all the images right there?
That's all of them.
Okay, all right. I had an image of Solomon on a mule. So if you can go back and we'll go to that other phrase. So I had an image of Solomon on a mule, because this is what happens. Adonijah thinks he's going to be the new king and throws a party and just says, fuck it, I'll declare myself king. Oh, excuse my language. And they put a bunch of sounds in. So what happens is David says, yo, take my son Solomon and put him on a mule on these certain robes and parade him through town. That's what he has to do to be made the king. Solomon on a mule is rode through town. And then people start celebrating. And then all right, so they have a problem at that point when Adonijah figures out that his father has picked Solomon and they know what's going on with them. He runs and puts his hands, which is called on the horns of the altar, because the altar used to have horns.
Horns, yeah.
They put blood, and he grabbed them because they can't hurt him. And he says, as long as you guys promise not to hurt me, I'll let go. And they say, and he says, call Solomon, or David makes a thing with them and says, if you don't do no evil, then cool, we won't do nothing to you. So what happens is, at a certain point later, he starts to conspire. He wants to get Solomon's throne. This is Solomon's brother. What does he want? He asks for Abishag, the fire warmer, the one that David used to have. Because if he could get his father's harem, the king's harem, he's in charge through the harem by having the king's harem. That was what he wanted to have his power. And then the Bible says, no, if we give him that, then he's in charge. If he could get the fire warmer. And this is part of the word.
They need to control that Hestia, the Britanium.
Was the harem often a place of political power? Like,
100%.
Ladies.
And I didn't bring up the different eunuchs in the story. Eunuchos, the bed attendant, bed sitter is what it means. And Philip, the Acts of Philip, because it's the Kandaki, or the Candace of Ethiopia, her eunuch that meets Philip on the road and converts in the Acts of Philip. And there's a whole big thing about he's the ruler of Ethiopia. And so there's a big thing. So I wanted to point out this word right here and these words because I want to finish off real quick. I only got just one picture, two pictures with the pierced veil symbology. It's called in the Song of Solomon, the pierced veil. And there's some words they use in the Septuagint that point us in a direction. But some of the things I'm going to read part of it. I won't read all of it. It's very long. And if you had a Bible, you go to Song of Solomon, and it says, "My sister, my bride." That's how it starts. My sister, my bride. And we see that even in the last pages of the Bible, where it talks about the bridegroom and the host, and these bride symbologies and the host and getting married, the bridegroom. But it's his sister. He says, "My sister, my bride." And the word for bride is veiled. That's where they get the word from, to be veiled. It deals with piercing the veil, the headpiece. It deals with the headpiece, our head covering. And more of this story, I'll go on because I'm just paraphrasing from it. He knocks on the door and she won't let him in. She says, because she has taken off her inner garment and washed her feet. And she don't want to let him in, her lover. And this is in the Song of Solomon. So what she says happens is, my beloved sent his hand through the opening, and my womb was alarmed over him. His beloved sent the hand through the opening. We talked about the hands through the openings before and dealing with the scarlet thread in this stuff, because this is the part where it comes from. And so what happens is she gets up to open the door, she says, and her hands are covered with myrrh. And it says myrrh-stained fingers. And she opens the door, and he's not there no more because he's been taken away by the guards. And she says the guards come to her, and they take away her therestra, her theurestron. And that's the word right there. That's what it says in the Bible. That's what they snatch from her. And so when I went to unpack the word, it could be a lot of weird meanings. As in a summer garment, this weird headpiece. It means to warm, and it deals with thera, like therma, or wild, like a wild beast, like theriac.
I'm going to say, that means animal.
Yeah, it's that same theriac root. And so, and in some things, it means to sickle, like a reaper, like a harvester. And so that's is what they take from her. It's her veil. And in some cases, it's a medicated veil. At that, a medicated veil, because they had those too, filled with incense and oils, and you would put it on the hair, and it would seep into your hair. Because it had some kind of power, because that's what they take away from her. And it's that same root of the word that Abishag has that warms David. It's the thera. It's like this theriac, the yeshra. Some kind of power deal with warming in their hair and their head and cloths and garments and robes. Like I said, a medicated headscarf. And there's more in the story with Solomon's head in the Song of Solomon. So it says Solomon's head is chrysion, like kafaz. That means it's like to be Christed root. That same to Christ something. His head is Christed, but this means gold that's been minted or shaped in a certain way. Is chrysion. It's gold that's been rendered, gold that's been Christed. And it says his hair is bostricos. We've talked about that before. It means like dreadlocks. These locks are curls that's flowing fir trees as a crow, like a black crow. He has black dreadlocks. It says dreadlocks like a black crow.
Right.
And then it goes on a couple sentences later to talk about, it says, my beloved is lukos and muros, which means white and red. And she's describing Solomon. My beloved is white and red, lukos and muros, ruddy. The white and red. And this is the Song of Solomon. You can just pick it up and read, like, damn. If you use the Septuagint, you get these words, and you can translate the words a little differently. So go to the next image, and we'll finish with this. That's Cagliostro, his seal from his Masonic rite, Egyptian Masonic rite, that dealt with Solomon and the red dragon, piercing of the dragon. And he had the second degree, which was called the drinking of the primal matter, the materia prima. This maybe red porridge, or whatever it was to attain the Solomonic powers of the second degree. So, and that's in Cagliostro's. But they got rid of him, said he was crazy. So there you go.
Well, Cagliostro is kind of a bit of a charlatan and a liar. And you know, I'm not saying that all of his stuff was nonsense, because a lot of people have had magical success with Cagliostro. But he was you know, he's one of these magical characters, larger than life, who told stories about himself.
Oh,
You know?
100% charlatan. 100% charlatan. But repackaging the Red Dragon.
Yes. Very, very well. We need to do an episode on Cagliostro at some point. That would be wild.
I know nothing about the guy. Yeah, no, that'd be great for me. I'd love to watch that. That was brilliant, Dion. Really enjoyed that. Again, I don't know where you get it from. Like me and Snappy have probably been looking through the Testament of Solomon, and I've looked at a few other bits. You're off to flipping Haile Selassie. You know what I mean?
Well, he's the descendant of Solomon.
Right.
To some people, they worship him as that.
Yeah,
that's very true.
I mean, that's
very true.
Yeah. No, I love how wide your net is cast, and there's always something I've just got no idea about or would have never put together. I love it.
Now I'm ready for the meat and potatoes.
Ryan, do you want to go next?
I'll be the meat, then you're the potatoes.
Sounds good. I'm quite the potato, so.
Okay, so let's have a little chat before we really dig into this. Actually, could you put our faces back on, please?
Of course.
So let's actually talk about Solomon and the tales of Solomon and what they are. So first of all, I'd like to put a thesis more than anything down, and that is that Solomon controls. Let's not call them demons for now, because that's got a lot of baggage attached to it. Let's call them spirits. So to me, what is a spirit? Well, a spirit is a kind of a mind form, a series of thought forms put together into a mind form. So the way I've described it before is there are two forests. One forest is full of wolves and bears and poisonous plants and thorns, and there's big patches in it, and the sun can't really penetrate it. So that the spirit of that forest is the bad spirit of the forest. Don't go in that forest. It's full of bad spirits. The good forest, it's full of nice mushrooms and nice fruit, and it's bunny rabbits and hawks, and there's beautiful things in that. And the spirit of that forest is good. So those are your two spirits. It's like this total summation of all the minds that are contained within that body. Okay. So when we look at Solomon's stories, especially like the Testament of Solomon, you can't help but notice pretty much straight away that all these demons that he's facing are his own demons. They're aspects of himself. They're things like nostalgia and lust and just things that affect you. And the way it's put is there's one demon that's 36, like a legion of 36, all combined into one chap, and he's clearly the deacons of the zodiac. It's even mentioned that he's Aries and that there are three aspects to his head. Oh, is that the dragon? I get confused. But anyway, one of these various monsters that he has an interaction with even says, like, I am to do with Aries. I am a migraine, which is in the head. Aries is the head. I am blindness. I am, something else. All these Aries afflictions. What it seems to me like they're doing is they're taking the zodiac and other things, like Dion mentioned the sevens, which are the seven planets, the seven virtues, the seven vices. They're taking these things as a wheel of psyche, as in, like, these are the opposites, this is that. They're making a map of you. And then each of those is put into its negative aspect, and then Solomon's got to battle them. It's him. It's this age-old tale of cleaning yourself out. Jesus tells you to do it. Buddha tells you to do it. Solomon's doing it. It's what all these sages are doing. They're cleaning themselves spiritually. It's a spiritual battle. He's battling spirits. He's battling his own demons. Would you say that's a fair, quick summation of what's going on there?
I would agree full-heartedly. There is something that happens with the rise of Christianity where the inner path, the inner journey is largely forgotten in the Western world, or becomes disconnected as the mystery schools get destroyed. And it doesn't come back until you get people like Petrarch, right? Petrarch famously climbs Mount Ventoux, and then when he gets to the top of Mount Ventoux, he does the sortes, and the sortes rebukes him and is like, why are you exploring this bloody mountain? You should be looking inside to find truth. And so he abandons his tourism and exploring the world and pursues that inner journey. And this marks the revitalization of that in the West. But like, there's clearly in these earlier traditions this imaginistic, poetic form of engaging with reality and learning to confront the self, knowing the self. I mean, that is literally what they say at the Oracle of Delphi. What are they going to teach you? What do they teach you when you go through these mystery rites? At the end, you're supposed to know the self. You're confronting the self. You go through a death and a rebirth. It's a form of psychotherapy more than anything. You know, of course, it's greater than that. I don't want to isolate magic, but there's a clear element of all of this within it. You know, and we've talked about this at length. In many ways, the monstrous, the dragon, is the base self. It's that natural animalistic part of the human psyche, and that we need to confront this and put it into mastery. You know, and that's why, you know, that divine feminine, that Lady Babylon, she's so powerful because she masters the dragon. You know, we've been talking about with the Solomonic tradition, we have King Solomon slaying the dragon. We have Prince George or King George or Saint George, slaying the dragon. But there is that alternative tradition where you put the dragon to work. You know, they become your chariot.
They build your temple for you.
Exactly, your temple guardian.
Yeah. And if you think about it, the name Solomon comes from shalom, peace. That's what it comes from. His peace within himself, his kingdom, his temple. You build. Well, look, right. So the thing that got me into all this occult stuff in the first place was I had a big trip, and towards the end of the trip, after as many other things happened, a very masculine voice came to me, showed me a series of pyramids on a plane in 3D, like in wireframe, and it was spinning around the room. And I'm like, oh my God, I've had far too many of these mushrooms. And the male voice said to me, well, let's call it God, because that's what it felt like, even though I'm not really a believer like that. It said, you've got to build Solomon's temple. And I'm like, oh, wait, these are very good mushrooms. And I had to ring my friend quickly because it was just getting too much for me to handle. I needed to speak to somebody. I'd already been through so much before that. But yeah, it's so funny that, like, the very thing that I was doing, which was clearing myself out and getting in touch with myself, was the very thing that Solomon is teaching you to do. However, shall we crack on with this this presentation then? What do you think about all that, Dion? Have you got anything to add? Dion says no. Dion's on mute, I think. So when Dion mentioned the Hopo bird and that he basically went and fetched Sheba. Was that right? Could you say that again briefly?
Yep, that's right. It was the Hopo bird, which is a scalped head, and he would send the riddles back and forth.
Like
it's a crest, and even the word for King Solomon in the Septuagint, basilisk. Remember the basilisk?
Like a basilisk. Yeah,
same word.
Yeah. That's what I was. I knew when I was looking it up. I'm like, Dion's going to love this, but you already got there before me. Dion's also going to love this.
There you
go. So I'm going to do the presentation. I went French that time.
You went French style, huh? No, you didn't go Phoenician.
So what we do is we talk about Solomon, and enough of that. So this Hopo bird features quite a few times because Solomon's got to build his temple, and apparently the temple, because it's a holy place, shouldn't be built with with tools, basically with iron tools, with the sound of chisel or hammer, it's said. So he's like, how am I going to do this? And then he hears about the Shemia worm, which was brought up before, and he basically enslaves Asmodeus, Ashmedai, and who's like one of the kings of the demons. And he says, well, he says, I know how to find you this Shemia worm that can cut through stone. And obviously it's not using any tools, so it's good for the temple. He says, however, it's at the top of a mountain. It's in the sea, at the top of a mountain, and there's a Hopo bird on top. And that knows the secret of the Shemia worm. So He sets it up. The demon goes over. They collect it. Apparently, they put a sheet of glass, a sheet of glass over the top of the bird's nest, so that it'll drop this worm on top to cut through the glass, and then they can take the worm. But there seems to be very much a mix that it's not a worm, as these things never are what they say they are. It's a green stone. So a lot of modern guys think it's emery, like an emery board, because they used to put that on wheels and it'd cut through stone. But again, there's sound there, and it's not good enough.
I've heard some people think it's a form of uranium or something, and that they're using radiation. People get wild with
that one. Well, there's a lot of that stuff brought up with the Ark of the Covenant.
Because the Ark of the Covenant is also made out of lead, right? The stone of Saturn. But
it's like Ark of the Covenant's like wood, gold. It's like it's built like a battery. There's something to the Ark of the Covenant.
Well, it's insulated. It is insulated, and part of the things is that it's the tribe of Levi that's in charge of the Ark, and you get the word levitation from that as well. And they had to be chained to it, so they wouldn't rise off the ground, and they could get shocked if they touched it in the wrong way.
Yeah. So with because you said before they were given gold and they had to, he said, to pull the gold apart or something. I forgot what he said, but that reminded me of the Ark of the Covenant, because according to modern theories, that's monoatomic gold that's in there. If you remember when Moses came off the mountainside there with his stone, it's always stones, these stone tablets. They're all worshipping Hathor, the Egyptian cow goddess. Yeah, and then he burns it down and makes them eat it. So they reckon it's monoatomic gold, which is single atoms of gold.
Strewn. He calls it to strewn. He's strewn it on the gold onto the pot, and they do drink it. And so, if it was a punishment, why did he have them drink the gold?
Well, they reckon that might be another form of manna that's in the Ark of the Covenant. And if that's the case, it would be building up a big static electricity on the inside, and then it would be conducted by whatever's on the outside. You know what I mean?
And so
the Ark of the Covenant's cool.
I'll tell you what the ormus is, because a lot of people don't know what you're talking about in terms of this monatomic gold. Consider it gold that's in the ground that has been struck by lightning at the temperature of lightning, arced by lightning, and it puts it into a spin, an orbital spin with monatomic. And people, they said they've weighed it, and it weighs, and this is in the mythology category. It weighs less. It takes away weight because the weight is in a different orbital spin. And the reason they started studying this was because there was a farmer who had bought land and he couldn't grow on his land, and the dirt was bad. So he had a test done on it, and they said, you got this weird stuff. And so there's people that try to make this stuff to this day. A lot of it is salts, which is and it's not good for you. That's the fake version of this stuff. If it would have to be, the real version of this stuff has to be arced at the temperature of a lightning for it to displace the gold to get that. And they used to eat gold as in cakes, the pharaoh cakes, but other people posit them. So eating of gold is a sacred ritual, so it's not a punishment.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all this stuff's messed up. We went on so long, then I forgot where I was. So there was this worm. Partly, sometimes it's described as a worm, sometimes it's a green stone. Often we're dealing with these stones. So I want to talk about the stone that is because he wants to build he wants to make the foundation stone, the cornerstone, from a Naxian stone, as in Naxia in Greece, where they had lovely marble. Though these words often get confused and transliterated. So can anyone read that bottom corner? I can read it. The stone the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. Psalms something. So that's something often cited by the Masons. Okay. So eventually that cornerstone, we're talking about people. Solomon's temple is you, right? So how many corners do you have, Snappy? I don't have any really.
Yeah.
Apart from the very, maybe the back, the front of your head, the back of your head, the back of your bottom, and the front of yourself. Okay, so now this eventually becomes the cornerstone of an arch, the chief central stone of an arch. and it has letters written around it that we'll get into in a moment. But we can see on a Masonic grave here, we've got this keystone, basically, which shares the same symbology as this first stone laid down for the temple by Solomon. And Hiram Abiff, obviously, who's totally part of this. So if we go on to the next. Hey, so here we go, straight to the pelvis. So a lot of these images in the center are from Manly P. Hall's book, Initiates of the Flame, where he gives a lot of stuff away, but in symbols, and doesn't really say much about them. So he brings attention to the kind of tools that are used. So there are tools used, but they are not making any sound. They're not made of iron. They're made of other things. So you can imagine within that spade that we can see there, which is much like the Masonic trowel, it's a Masonic implement. And don't forget that the temple, so you get like the Solomon's lot. Eventually, that gets to the Templars. Templars are the Masons and the Rosicrucians. And that's as far as we need to take it, really. There's not many steps in that. So we've got this spade, which is the spine and the sacral plexus at the bottom, the sacrum at the bottom. And we can see that keystone shape, which is red in the center there. It's got HTWSSTRSH. It's something like Hiram Abiff taken to go and see King Solomon. It's such a silly acronym that you know it doesn't mean that. And elsewhere, I've actually worked this out. It's processional numbers again, but we'll not go into it here because it gets a bit boring. What's more important right now is that it's the sacrum again. You can see that keystone. Manly P. Hall's done all these apart from that Ark of the Covenant at the top. But we can see we got this Masonic keystone and then the sacrum beneath it. If anyone can actually see in this Masonic tracing board on the left, we've got the triangle at the top, which is obviously the Trinity, and then it's coming through that the keystone's missing. It's coming through the arch, hitting the Ark of the Covenant. What's underneath it? A guy with a spade. And then we've got Dion's Trinity beneath him. So
and on each side, you got your poles. You got your walking and bows walking. Yep. Your royal arch, which they turned into royal arch masonry.
Yes. So I'll get into the poles in a moment. We've three have talked about it so many times, but I will do it quickly. But it's always the same thing. It's this stone that is at the bottom, that is the first thing to be laid down before we put everything else above it. And obviously we could go to Kundalini stuff there. But let's move on to the next one because I want to get into this whole pole bird. But before we do that, I just want to show you these are after the last few Dragon's Tongue episodes. I've kept saying, did I see a pelvis there? And I do keep seeing pelvises everywhere. So we can see in the top right hand corner, we got Starbucks lady. What's her name again? Melusine. We've got Melusine in the shape of hips, but we often see these serpentine forms. We've got to the left of that on the top row, we've got an alchemical mountain, which is in the form of the hips and the top of the spine. Then we've got something that Dion put up a couple of weeks ago. I think it was from Pompeii, and it was the two Agatha daemons with the people with the altar.
The Lilarium.
Yeah, I'm like, can anyone see hips in that? And then when I put hips over the top, it turned out the spine was there and two kidneys were there as well, if you can see that, but it's all in white. It's not easy. Next to that on the top row, we've got an alchemical image that looks very hip-like. Then underneath that, I'm almost certain that the vitriol symbol there from alchemy, it's difficult to see. There's a pair of hips over the top, is a pair of hips. Then we've got Horus and Set over a pair of hips and spine doing a kind of version of the churning of the Milky Ocean.
If I could say one thing, Set is the donkey and Horus is the crow riding the donkey. There's a symbology with Solomon, just so you know. I came across that.
Yeah. Just the same thing. There's a snake and an eagle, a donkey and a vulture, whatever they are. So yeah, the same. I'm just going, and we got an alchemical one in the corner there, but it's the same stuff over and over again. So if we go to the next image, please. So here's what I'm saying. It's It's the Western version of all this Kundalini stuff. You've got the sword in the stone. There's always often seems to be a stone at the bottom. We've got Jacob's ladder, which is obviously he rests his head on a stone, and your head is resting on that stone at the bottom. We've got the pineal at the top of the caduceus staff, and the sun there at the top of it. And you can see those two wings of the two hemispheres of the brain, spine with the nerve endings going up it. I've also got the Yakin and Boaz, which you can see as the two sides of the body, and then there'd be a central pillar between them, but they never go into that. That's as far as I need to go on that. I'm just showing that there's these repeating motifs of a stone and then something coming out of the stone. So if you go on to the next image, please. So here we go. So this hopo bird, part of its mythology outside this Shemia worm, who obviously eats through stones in order to cut them, and then we build the temple on top, because this is either an archstone or a cornerstone. So what this hopo bird does is it's said, it's just in Jewish folklore in general, that this is the bird that takes. Oh, by the way, the Shemia worm is as big as a barley corn. It's particularly put like that. So this hopo bird will go around and it will drop a seed into a crack in stone, and then over the years a tree will grow out from the stone. Think of that sacral bone at the bottom, which is actually fused together. It looks like it's a few vertebrae, but it's not. It's fused together like a stone. And then the tree, the nervous system, the spine grows out of it. And of course, birds live at the top. We've already had a mount, the sea at the bottom. Let me just show you on my own body. I'm kind of wearing pajamas, by the way, but can you see me there? So there's the sea at the bottom, and we got the earth, and we got the air, then we got the fire. This is how the ancients divided the body. Okay, so if we've had a sea at the bottom, sea around the mountain, that's the ocean I just pointed to, and then I am the mountain. The spine is the mountain with the holy place on top. The Solomon's temple is a reproduction of the tabernacle, which is there's an outer and an inner. It's all maps of the human body. I think that's pretty well known, though, isn't it? So we've got this bird that's dropping a seed into a crack that's then sprouting out, and then obviously we got a place for a bird to live again at the top of that. So I've actually put the sphenoid bone. Can you see that there's a bone there in the middle? It looks a bit like a bird. You see that?
Yeah.
So that's here's the sphenoid in the face, and it cups at the back where the pituitary and the pineal gland are. It looks like an owl. I think it's why a bat or a bird. I think it's one of the reasons when you see a bat or an owl particularly, that this is one of the things that they're getting at. So we know the pineals related to like the eye of Ra. Ra's a bird again. He's the bird that lives at the top of the tree. He can see far, can see wide and far. And we had this barleycorn idea. I've actually put a picture of the pineal gland in the central column at the bottom, and then we've got like a silhouette of it with the nerve ends coming off it. And we can see next to it, there's a picture of the Shemia worm that's as big as a barleycorn, as is the pineal gland. So what the myth is, it seems, for this Western occult tradition, is that either an egg or a stone or something similar like that. I think of Mithras cracking the egg and being self-born, or this Shemia worm eating away at the stone. You've got to kind of crack this egg at the bottom, and then out of it, or crack the stone, and then out of it, this tree can grow, or you can climb the mountain, or whatever the analogy is. It's the same as the Kundalini stuff in India, which is there's a coiled serpent at the bottom, and you've got to encourage it to break out of its egg and rise up the spine. So it's all the same stuff. And especially because this hopo bird is said to do that. It's said to drop this seed into a rock, and over the years it grows. It's a slow process, but it happens. I can't imagine a worm cutting through stone is gonna be a quick thing.
Nope. Wild.
I used to think there was a drug reference there, but it never quite worked for me. And then when I looked at this bird a little deeper, I'm like, because I've seen it so many times. There are so many of these ancient goddesses that's a bird in a tree, or a bird clutching an egg, or a start egg comes to mind. There's so many of them.
Also, the mimicry, the bird that mimics and sends a message that causes a big transformation in a war. When I think of the Hopo in terms of King Solomon, I immediately think of the Mabinogion and Branwen and her story, where she speaks to the starlings to come get rescued by Bran.
Well, weirdly, that Hopo bird in most cultures is a bad omen. It's in league with the demons, and it just seemed funny that Solomon, who is actually controlling the demons, is controlling this bird. Because I was shocked that she gone and got Sheba. That was mad. But we can see that there's this egg, this egg at the bottom, and then a tree, and then a bird at the top. There's loads of myths like this, loads and loads of them. And they all seem to be getting at this same stuff. When I've really tried to penetrate them, this is only ever this is the only satisfactory answer I seem to ever get, apart from all the procession stuff.
It's tied up also in the myth of Tyre in the burning purple. Remember, it's a tree on a floating island that has snakes coiled on it, and then maybe a bird that comes, and then the dog that finds the purple shells on the shore. And that's Tyre. That's Hiram.
Yeah,
and Zoe,
it seems to require drugs to. Sorry, Snappy, go on.
It's also the Genesis story, right, with Adam and Eve, and even the earlier version with the Greek goddess Zoe, right? What is the secret? What does she share with Adam? Is how to conquer her basal self. That's the knowledge she gets with the snake and the drug magic. She gets the herbal magic. And this allows them to have the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah, it totally is Adam and Eve. It's always time, drugs, sex, and the inner work. It's always, and all these things seem to be bound together. I've not quite understood yet, and we spoke about this in previous episodes. I can't quite understand how the numbers, all these processional, weird, harmonic geometries actually, in a real sense, fit into this energy stuff, apart from the fact that they're describing it as that energy from the beginning of time that makes time. And obviously, if that energy is building the whole universe, then of course it's going to be building these numbers. In fact, there would be its principle. But they seem to be insinuating that somehow that's in the body as well. And that's something I can't figure out. Unless I'm wrong about that. So next image, please. We're cool on that? That's a bit more simple than I thought. So I'd just like to prove somewhat that these things that I've just mentioned are in these arts. So let's start in the bottom left there on a Kabbalistic drawing. We can see that the lower, I forgot what it's called, one of the lower worlds where the moon is and Mercury and Venus are on the Tree of Life, because those triangles are really representing the Tree of Life. Is in that hip area, and it's not like every other part of the body. They've just got the face or the hands, but they're showing the hips skeletally. We can see a diagram of Adam and Eve just above that, and obviously it comes from the rib, but they're joined by the hip. There's a sex thing going on there. They cover up the hip area with a fig leaf. And again, we got birds in the tree and a snake in the tree, and it's all the same stuff. We can see who's there, Pan, and I bet that's Solomon. No, it's Moses. He's got horns. Yeah, Pan and Moses. God knows what they're doing. Probably getting it on. He gets everywhere, Pan. Hey, did you see my pun there? He gets everywhere, Pan. It means everywhere. Right, so if we go next to Adam and Eve, there's an alchemist there covering up his hips with the athanor, and everything that's going on above that, everything that comes out is traveling upwards. But the thing that the place that's doing the work is covering over his hips. If we look on the next image, again, we can see this repeating. There's a stone, and either a ladder or a mountain or a tree bursting from the stone. And again, we've got this bat or owl or bird at the top. There is specifically a bat for this sphenoid bone at the tree, because that's where the birds live, at the top of the tree, where the fruit is. And obviously we got the dragon and things like that, which we've already said Solomon was controlling with the, with his ring and with his understanding, basically. And I would like to say that ring that Solomon's got at the beginning it's just a ring. There's obviously there's a seal on there, but it's never described. That kind of comes later, as well as the Star of David that we all know is actually alchemical and is added to the Jewish canon much later on. There are many complaints by rabbis that is actually an alchemical, more pagan thing really than it's there in the East as well, but it's not really Jewish, that Star of David. But when you do look at the seals from the various grimoires and the various greater and lesser keys of Solomon, it doesn't look like that. It looks like just looks like a magical sigil, basically. Again, if we look, so bottom row, second from the left, there's kind of a guitar-looking thing there. But again, everything that's doing the work, if you can say, I realize it's quite small. Everything that's doing the work on these images is in that area of the hips and the genitals. And again, it's got snaky forms going up and then birds towards the top. I appreciate it's difficult to look at that. Next to it, we've got a lion, a bull, an eagle, and a man. And the man's got his hips covered again. Particularly, you'll often see people in pentagrams, because pentagrams are all about golden ratio and the scale of the body. There's loads going on in pentagrams. And the angles are all 72. And I will note that most of the numbers that you find in the Testament of Solomon and otherwise are all these processional numbers: 72, 36. They're all, 72 demons, 72 names of God. 72 is the number of years in a processional, in a great year. To go, I'll explain it in a minute when we get there. I know I talk about maths on here often, but I can't stand the stuff. And then off to the right of that, the bottom right hand corner, we've got something growing from rocks again, and then the snakes, and then a bird at the top. These the symbols of time too, and we'll get into that because they're encoding many layers into this.
The only thing I wanted to add too is that we have all of these bigendered coming together symbols, right? You have the divine Rebbe, right, wearing the red and the white, the masculine and the feminine coming together as a single united being. You have the bird, the black and the red in the bottom, this reforming of the cosmic man, right? And all of those in the ancient Prometheus story, after Prometheus creates humanity, they are a single being, united at the back, male and female. And Zeus, because he's afraid that they will be too much like the gods, splits people in half. And now we have to go through that alchemical wedding. We have to go through this process of finding the other to reformulate our whole,
Yep. And although there's an earthly meaning to that, as in being able to use the left and right hemispheres of your brain, essentially being logical and have your heart open, it's also an analogy for this ionic realm, because before time was gendered into a male at the beginning and a female at the end, it was together. And all time happened all at once, and there was no split. So that's what they're getting at. They're getting towards immortality, being in the realm of the gods, which is this blissed out, either drugged up or, it's the whole point of ascending the tree. It's either a meditation or crazy drugs.
It's also such a primal image, though, is that physical transformation too, right? We see the great sage, and less again in the Christian tradition. You don't see this with, or in the Jewish tradition, you don't see this with King Solomon. But in the Greek tradition, this is everywhere. The great sages change genders, or they gender bend, and this is a sign of them coming into attachment with that other side of themselves. They have to reconcile before they can even Heracles, the most masculine of all masculine men, has to don the lingerie and the blonde wig before he can achieve apotheosis. He has to confront that feminine Atlanta and move her. The
Gucci bag and high heels of Athena. Get them on.
Get them on, buddy.
No, but I mean, there's, it is there is that gendered aspect, that gender pole there is there as well. That is also being explored within one's inner psyche. You got to integrate the self, and there's the animal too, right? Tiresias turns into a man and a woman, You know, he even gives birth as a woman, but he also becomes a mouse in one of the stories, you know?
He does that.
So
He's always doing that. You know,
anyway.
can you just for once not turn into a mouse? I'm trying to have a nice meal with my parents. Just pack it in. Next image, please, Snappy. Well, we can see from that, especially with the stone and the plants growing out of it, all the same stuff. Right. So we've got this Magna Mater tradition, that the symbol of the 2M looking things in the center. This is the more Christian side of it. We see in these kind of characters to the left of that, these W's. We see it in the sigil of Saturn. We see it in a lot of the iconography of Saturn, actually. We see it in Egypt in the form of these M's at the top of staffs. It's always getting at the hips. I've even found it on, if you look in the center, we can see the Moai of Easter Island. And at the top of their little nappies that they wear around the back, there's this M in the exact place that you'd expect it to be. It's this hip shape, the shape of it. And I'll note as well, in the zodiac, the kidney, if you go to China, it's definitely the hips, but a lot of the energy is coming from the kidneys to support this stone. You're pumping. I'll tell everybody the secret in the slightest of way. What you do is, if you want to do this yourself, because when you're doing drugs, obviously it affects your body, and you don't really want to do that because you're not as tuned up as you might be. You know, like you tune, if you're fit and you're healthy and you're strong, you're tuned up well. But if you're taking lots of drugs, obviously that has bad effects on your system. Unless they're the right drugs, I'm sure the Medea types had some kind of system going on where they were counterbalancing everything. However,
It's dangerous path.
exactly. And you wouldn't have been good looking after that. We've been talking before. You probably had skin problems, which is where they get the snake skin from.
Or went blind,
Anyway,
or had ultra sensitive
yeah.
ears. Lots of weird
Yeah,
shit.
it must have been awful. Yeah. Oh, like, anyway. So what you do is you simply stop thinking. You know, you go into meditation and you put your attention, not your intention, your attention on the area of question. So you might do it, which was something weirdly, the trip after I'd had the Solomon's Temple trip, the first thing it showed me to do, because some reason mushrooms talk to you if you have the right amount. It just showed me this meditation where I was putting my attention in places of my body and it just relax. As far as I know, that is actually a legit form of relaxing form meditation. But I showed it, you know, I'd call it the goddess, the muse, showed it to me. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I found out later on that's exactly how you do this. You basically just really relax and focus concentration on one of these areas. So like between the hips of the sacral plexus towards the solar plexus, or on your third eye between the brows there. And you do different things. I'll not go into it. Maybe we'll in a future episode. However, so we've got this keystone, which I've put in the bottom left-hand corner, an arch. The keystone supports the top of the arch. And if you remember a few slides back, it was the stone that the builders rejected. Do you remember that? And it just seemed like an odd thing to say. Why would you reject a stone that's going in the corner? Well, if you think about it, on your spine, all those vertebrae support your whole body. The sacrum doesn't. The sacrum just dangles there and does nothing. It's been rejected by the builders. So there you go. Yeah. So he's not using the building, but it's this important. Because there's a nerve bundle there called the cauda equinis, like the horse tail that comes through that area, and it's because it's linked to sex and lots of other things. There's lots going on in that area, and because your guts are there and they're insulated well, the idea is that you can actually store a charge there, and then you pull that into the lower vertebrae, and then you can pull it through the cerebrospinal fluid. For a man, it's through the you do your Kegels and you're pumping on the what's it called? Your little donut in there. Prostate. Flipping out. So you pump it on your prostate, and then that squidges all the juices that's been saved up, and all this energy goes up your spine, and then magical things happen. We've heard the stories of the Christos and the oils and the milk and honeys and whatever analogy it's put through. But basically, it opens your third eye up kind of stuff, and then you're off out into the universe. Whether that's because of an endogenous DMT trip or somehow you change the frequency on the radio that is your consciousness and you're somewhere else. I certainly had downloads of... Most of this was downloaded to me in one night. It just took me 10 years to figure it all out. So that Masonic keystone, we can see next to the archway with the sacral plexus. I've actually put the Masonic keystone there. That's how it's drawn. That's from I think it's from Manly P Hall, actually, that one. But on the image next to it, we can see the Jehovah trapezium that I've talked about a few times recently, which is based on the numbers that you extract from the name of God Jehovah. So that trapezium is basically an exploded version of that keystone. Now we can even see under the keystone, for anyone that's got eyes that can read that, it says the 4 JHVH Great Pyramid Triangles of the Keystone. So when you explode that out, you can turn it into this trapezium. When you finish the lines on that trapezium, you join it up. It's basically the angle of the Earth. We can see I've put in the bottom right hand corner, I've carried on that trapezium going up into a triangle. You'd get the North Star at the top, and then I've put a globe of the Earth with the correct angle of it, and it all lines up, everything perfectly.
You know what this also makes me recognize and make me think of, we've talked about this several times, is that Libra is an innovation of the Greeks, and it's a later addition to the Egyptian astrological signs. And originally, Scorpio and Virgo came together as one central sign to represent humanity. And they're both that M symbol. And they both come together as kind of this primordial arch. When you bring them out together.
I completely agree. That's what I was trying to get at with the kidneys. I just lost my train of thought there. So like Libra is the kidney area basically, and then Sagittarius is more the hips, and you know we got these two hip forms sandwiched between the kidneys. So there's something to that for me. Okay, I think we're ready to go on to the next image. What I want to get is that these things are manifold basically, and this is just the way it was. However, you can see that still, as we got this Jehovah trapezium, we've got the shape of the hip still there, and we've got the shape of this M still in there. Now, I noticed when I was looking at, so I've been writing my book again this week, and the issue of the Sphinx has been prominent. Now, I was surprised to see that where in a tradition like the Jews had, which is basically you're not supposed to have images really. You do have certain forms, but there's no images of God. But they have cherubim everywhere, the cherubim, and I didn't realize that the cherubim. I knew they were basically Sphinx-like, but when you look at them, they are just Sphinx. They look like a mix between Egyptian and Babylonian sphinxes. I will note for everybody out there, a sphinx is a lion, a bull, an eagle, and a man. When you add the name of God together, JHVH, which is this trapezium, it adds up to 26. When you add up the lion, the bull, the eagle, and the man, according to the place in the zodiac, you get 26. 26 is in relation to the 25,920 great year, which is the longest cycle made by the Earth and the solar system. Okay? And that then translates to the Sphinx, which then has these angles made by the shape of 20. The sides of this shape equal 26. 10 at the bottom, 5 at the top. Sorry, 10 at the bottom, 6 at the top, 5 at either side. Simple. And we've already shown that it's getting up these hips and the angle of the Earth, all that stuff, pointing there. So there you go. I'm just showing again that these were on the doors of the Temple of Solomon and inside on the curtain for the Holy of Holies. You know, as you go deeper and deeper in. So it's just repeating motifs for me. I find that exciting. Not much more to say about that I haven't said in previous images, but how cool is it that the Sphinx is follow that shape according to the legs. I think that's brilliant.
Beautiful.
Something you never, yeah. I read that in a really old book one night before I fell asleep. Frank Higgins. I think it was like 1915 he was writing, and just like, oh, by the way, it's Jehovah's Trapezium. I found the Jehovah's Trapezium. Oh, it's in the Sphinxes. It's in the what? And he had, in fact, the drawing in the bottom right hand is his.
Wild.
Yeah. Next image, please. So this relates to the two pillars at the front of the Temple of Solomon and lots of other places, and it's basically there are two poles: the pole of the Earth, as you know, the North Pole, and then there's the pole of the ecliptic, which is the band of the planets as they spin around your head. And when you bring these two things together, well, you can see on the B and the J pillars there, Boaz and Jachin, one's got the Earth on the top of it, and the other one's got the Zodiac on the top of it, because of the two poles for those two things. When you get that, the interaction of these two things creates this long cycle called precession. And when you do all the maths for it, you get these wonderful numbers out at the top that basically unlock the key to the universe, essentially, like the building blocks of the universe. Go on to the next image. I'm just doing this to be thorough. I know we've all heard this before. Those are the numbers you get out of it, and as it shows, it builds, you know, the size of the Earth, size of the Moon. Could show you Jupiter, could show you the orbits of the planets from it, size of the Sun, the reason why the Moon eclipses the Sun, and you know, one's 400 times smaller, but the other one's 400 times further away. All that kind of stuff. And I will say, the reason why this works is because of this pattern that I found, which was the Temple of Solomon that God told me to build in this crazy trip. If we go on the next image, there we go. That's the same keystone in my pattern, and we can see those dotted lines that go through that keystone are theirs. The green lines are mine, and it just, everything fits perfectly, beautifully, wonderfully.
Wow.
That, yeah. If you'd like to look at that at home, and then as I said, it all explodes. So what have you got in this keystone? Well, you got the whole of the art in this Solomonic keystone, because don't forget it says Hiram of Biff, not Hiram of Tyre. I might be able to see this. Hiram of Tyre, widow's son, sent to King Solomon. There you go. That's what it says. So when you've got in that keystone, you've got the sacral plexus. You've got these processional numbers. You've got the pattern that I've done there. And I wish that it would have worked well, but because of the nature of a blueprint, I've actually got Isaac Newton's diagram for the Temple of Solomon, and it's clearly drawn to that pattern. But rather than do that, because, you know, you think all those lines and then my lines on top, it's difficult enough to show people in the first place. So what I've done is taken a Masonic tracing board of this Solomonic stuff and placed it over a handbag from the giraffe culture, which is 2500 BC. You know, it's in Iran, not too far from the same place in Israel, but obviously a lot long, 2,000 years before Solomon was even thought of. But when you take these two images are both using that template I just showed you, and when you place one over the other, you can see, and you'd have to have a biggish screen, but you'll see that what's on that Masonic tracing board is in the same place on that. It's a weight on this weight. It looks like a handbag. It looks like one of those ancient handbags, but it's a weight and a measure. So if anyone can see at home, you'll see just how well those two things fit together. They're the same thing. Without doubt, they are the same thing. You see where there's a pillar in Solomon's temple, you'll see there's a part of the pattern on the handbag that fits in perfectly. If you're on a phone, you've got no chance. If you're on a laptop, or better. If you put it on the big telly at home, you'll be okay.
That's amazing. Wild. Love it. Yeah,
I put the Masonic board circa 1800 and giraffe handbag 2500 BC. Quite a few years between those two things. And I promise when you look at that, or if you want to come on the Discord and ask me for a better copy, I'll give you one there. But it's gorgeous.
Amazing. So anything you want to leave the audience with from your presentation, Ryan?
I feel often that I'm repeating myself a little bit on these episodes. However, it's because when you get down to the root of it, they're just repeating things. All these cultures are sharing the same stuff. It looks like it's the Prisca theologia, the original like Stone Age religion stroke science. They'd worked loads of stuff out, and somehow it's carried on. And it's always these pillars. I've just looked for the pillars. When you see the pillars, you've got it. And there are two pillars at the front of Solomon's temple. I noticed in Dion's images with Sheba on there, they're always stood next to a pillar. And you look at all the old Greek stuff, it's Doric, Ionic, Corinthian pillars. It just seems to be this Stone Age religion to me, but they never write it down, and they never. It's always the religion behind the religion. Whatever the front story is, there's this Stone Age pillar, astrotheology, your spine, shamanic drug taking behind it.
Wild. What do you think, Dion?
That was brilliant. Love it. Love it.
All right. Yeah, that was so much fun, Ryan. And it definitely, makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it's a key to this, what we want to get at here is that King Solomon becomes this magical archetype for, like you said, the constructing of the archetypical man through going through this alchemical process of self-refinement, through completing the alchemical wedding and being reborn as that Phanes, that, child to come, that Harpocrates, going through that ion and achieving ionic life, right?
Yeah. I'd like people to look out for this motif of, you'll see an egg, but it'll be upside down, as in like the pointy bits downwards, and there'll be a snake around it. Yeah, or you'll see a bird in a tree, and the tree's looking bulbous at the bottom. I was looking at Oedipus because of the Sphinx mysteries, and Oedipus means swollen of foot. So there's this bulbous thing at the bottom, and then something's shooting out at the top, or a stone that you've got to crack, and a tree coming out of it. It's just a repeating motif that is so often used but never spoken about. Not by academics, but by them themselves. It's just part of the iconography more than it is the stories themselves, if you get me.
Right. Well, some things were not meant to be spoken. Some truths couldn't be said. They were meant to be encoded, right? They're meant to be understood in other ways. Some mysteries aren't like that, but yeah, wild stuff. All right, let's get into my part of the presentation here. What I wanted to do was to focus on the texts, to bring us the sources. This was just a fun picture I saw of Solomon that comes from the Arabic grimoire tradition. And this is of King Solomon commanding the demons.
Has he got? They all got eggs in the place that I just said. Oh,
yeah, they all got eggs in their belly, Ryan.
What the fuck?
Isn't that weird? I've not seen that before. Interesting.
I will say, sorry, just before you crack on, Snappy, we were talking about demons, and you get it in the Islamic Persian traditions, but you also get it in the Christian traditions. You can tell what the demons are because of what kind of animal they are, so it relates to that. But you'll see, like, is the head in the stomach? Well, then they've got an appetite for eating, the greedy. Do you know what I mean? Is it in the genitals? Well, the sex mad. Right. You can figure it out.
I don't know if you noticed, but you got the bird there to the left of Solomon.
Yeah. This lady here.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, there's a little tiny brown hopo bird there.
Yeah,
literally to the left.
Right. Amazing.
Good, well spotted.
All right, so we're going to start with the Bible, and this comes to us from King 1, chapter 3. So this is about Solomon asking for wisdom. So I wanted us to just really go to the core sources to see where this imagery is coming from. So of course we got to start with the Bible itself. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because a temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the instructions given by his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burned incense on the high places. By the high places, they're talking about the mountains, right? They're going to the sacred mountain. The king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on the throne in this very day. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong, for who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that you will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you whatever you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep your decrees and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life." Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. And so I wanted to start with that passage because that kind of sets us up with how God blesses Solomon and singles him out. But the reason why Solomon is singled out is very interesting, and this is an ongoing mythopoeic image that we see throughout the Greco-Roman and earlier pagan traditions. And this is that idea that when confronted with these spirits and they offer you a boon, you have to ask for knowledge. If you ask for greed or you ask for anything else, you will be destroyed. You see this constantly with the stories around Apollo and Lucifer, right? And these later evolve into the Faustian tales we get in Europe and whatnot. But the key here is that we're seeing is that Solomon is showing us what the good magician does. When confronted with that spirit, that deity who's going to give you a boon, you ask for the discernment to make right acts of justice, for wisdom and knowledge.
It's almost the same parable as the give a man a fish parable, eat for a day, all that stuff.
Exactly. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding exceeding much and largeness of the heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country and all the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Herman, and Chakol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol. And his fame was in all the nations round about. And he spake 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. And he spake of trees, from the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that springeth out of the wall. He spake also of beasts, and of fowl, and of creeping things, and of fishes. And then there came of all people to hear the wisdom of Solomon from all kings of earth, which had heard of his wisdom. Now, this all stood out to me because it sounds like all things that were claimed about by Orpheus. Orpheus was said to have composed specifically 1,005 songs and to have written all of these parables to the trees and to the birds. And now we have Solomon doing the same thing, 105 songs and then parallels to the trees and birds. So this, I think, is clearly one of these euhemeristic kind of mirrorings where they're trying to show that Solomon is a great and accomplished magician by making him akin to the great magician of the Greek tradition, Orpheus. And they're using these sacred numbers again. What do you think about that 1005? Does that stand out to you, Ryan?
Can you see my cogs ticking in my brain?
Yeah.
I was looking into the Greek and working out the gematria to see if there's anything attached to Sphinx, the word Sphinx. I noticed Lord picked up a lot in Lord is a processional season. Yod He Vav He is processional year. It's almost always these processional numbers. And 105 kept popping up, and I'm like, I don't know what 105 is. What would that be? And now you're saying that I've got to go and look into this again. It's been popping up recently, but there's still a mystery there for me.
Interesting. You know, I just kept thinking the 1 and the 5. The 5 is always related to the Earth and to Venus energy, and to, you know, in the Pythagorean number system, it's that you know, it's a prime kind of opposites coming together of opposites, the 3 and the 2, to bring creation. And then the 1 is that 1. So there's some kind of powerful generation going on there.
It's one of the first set. It's like an incomplete set. It would be like an animal or something like that. Like well, if you think of the chakras, it would be like an animal has 5 chakras, a human has 7, kind of an idea.
Right.
I mean, that's an analogy, but yes, that kind of thing.
But I wanted also to point this out because we're seeing where a lot of these myths begin, where that image of Solomon as this great magical, he composed all of these thousands of books, he wrote all these songs, he built the temple, he's blessed by God to be the most wise, right?
He's Trismegistus.
Exactly.
You know, these same characters, yeah.
Same character. This is why I thought it was so interesting that I noticed the parallel to Orpheus. It seems very clearly in my mind that the writers of the biblical canon are actively trying to make Solomon the king magical figure. They're using stuff that we would associate with the Egyptians, with the Greeks, with the Chaldeans, and with the Persians, and they're all bringing them into one centralized figure who's the greatest, you know, who's mastered all of these arts. You know, well, it's just funny. It's because like Plutarch talks at length with the Magian arts. You have to be able to read the stars. You got to be able to do the magical potions. You have to be able to do the necromancy, to talk to the dead and to the spirits. And you have to be able to build. And Solomon can do all of these things. He is a magi, a quintessential magi, you know?
When you read the stories, though, like the Asmodeus story, he asked Asmodeus, I can't remember what he asked him. He asked him something difficult to do, and Asmodeus is like, yeah, if you just take off that ring and give it to me, I'll show you. And he's like, all right, mate, yeah, no worries. So for all this wisdom, he seems to do a lot of stupid shit. Excuse my French.
So, you know, in the Quran version, I think the jinn steal his ring.
They actually take it.
Yeah, they steal his ring because he wasn't humble enough, but he eventually gets it back. You know, but they steal it because, because he was. It deals with his humility, you know. But in wisdom, and if I'm not correct, it might be the hoopoe bird that brings it back.
Again with this hoopoe bird. So
that was I'd never really come across it before, and it just stuck out to me. And the fresh things in Dion's presentation, I'd like to look into that some more.
Well, we know that the birds are always associated with the goddesses. They're usually temple priestesses. Sometimes they're the active spirits of the goddess herself, you know, but there's clear magical illusion going on there, right?
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's that sphenoid among many other things. Well, they're pointing up here.
Oh, of course. That's their
Excuse me.
So next I wanted to go to Josephus, you know, famous historian, writer, Jewish writer, wrote a book on antiquities. And he is responsible for much of the early Solomonic mythology in the story. This is a Jewish writer writing about a Jewish king. And he writes more about Solomon than he does even write about King David. So I got this from Philip Harland, This is a really amazing blog. If anyone wants this blog, I'll share it in the Discord to people and whatnot. But this guy translates incredible stuff. And this is where my translations of Josephus come from. So here we go, Josephus talking about Solomon. God granted Solomon knowledge of the skill used against lower spirits, or demons or daimones, for the benefit and healing of men. He also composed incantations by which illnesses are relieved, and left behind forms of exorcism with which those possessed by lower spirits drive them out, never to return. And this kind of cure is of very great power among us to this day. I have seen a certain Eleazar, who is of the same tribe, homophilion, as myself, liberate men possessed by demons in the presence of Vespasian, his sons, tribunes, and a number of other soldiers. This was the manner of the cure. He put to the nose of the possessed man a ring, which had under its seal one of the roots prescribed by Solomon. On this, see the Testament of Solomon, which I'll show you guys. Then, as the man smelled it, Eleazar drew out the lower spirit through his nostrils. Once the man immediately fell down, Eleazar urged the lower spirit never to come back into him, speaking Solomon's name and reciting the incantations which he had composed. Then, wishing to convince the bystanders and prove to them that he had this power, Eleazar placed a cup or foot basin full of water a little way off. He commanded the lower spirit as it went out of the man to overturn the cup of water and make known to the spectators that the lower spirit had left the man. When this was done, the understanding and wisdom of Solomon were clearly revealed. This is why we have been induced to speak about these things, in order that all men may know the greatness of Solomon's nature and how God favored him, and in order that no one under the sun may be ignorant of the king's surpassing virtue of every kind. So Josephus,
he's trying to inflate him there, isn't he? He's like,
really
Solomon's the best thing.
Yep. And he's like, I may not have known Solomon, but I saw one who invoked Solomon's name and he cast out a demon into a cup of water. I swear. And there were Roman guards there. They saw it too.
Things that never really happened.
Right? Just wild. But we see where this mythology begins, right? And we see that even by the time Josephus is writing this, it's a clearly established tradition and lineage, right? This magician Eleazar is not only invoking God, but invoking Solomon, according to Josephus, and using that ring with the root, with the seal, with the name of God.
So there's some traditions that say that Al-Wasir, Al-Asar, and that's how you'd say Osiris.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's El, because that's where you get that EL or that AL prefix in front of titles. Wasar, Osar.
So Wazir comes from Osiris?
Yeah.
It was Asir. Osiris was Asir in Egypt.
Yeah, Asir, El Asir.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well,
and then there's some that also deals with Lazarus, and it'll connect with resurrection and the mummy being resurrected, and that's what Osiris is resurrected. And there's a lot of other stories. There's always more.
Well, that made me think that Solomon itself in Hebrew it's Shlomo. It's related to that word for peace, Shalom, Shlomo. Nothing like Solomon, and you see it's spelled Solomon. You can't help but think Salome. Is that a female version of Solomon? And then there's the occult spellings of it, which is you got Sol as in the sun, Mon as in the moon, and you got Solo and Mono there. You've got the masculine and feminine
coming together in a single
things
form.
in there, yeah. And I think Manly P. Hall pointed out that you got Sol, which is the sun, Om, which is the sun in India, and On, which is the word for the sun in Egypt.
Yeah, Sol Amun.
Amun as well, yeah.
Or Sol.
It's easy
Amun.
to do this with magic and get confused in
Right.
yourself. Yeah, doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
No, but there's all these there's all of these connections that are happening, right? And people are all like, here's the thing. People are, think about it in terms of like comic book stories. My guy is the best guy. My guy's better than your guy. So of course my guy can do what your guy can do. My guy has a similar name too. Right? It's like it's that kind of silliness. And all of it gets bigger and bigger over time. So these connections are there and they aren't there at the same time. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's fun to explore with that right brain, as long as you keep your left brain checking out the fact that you're probably making this stuff up.
Exactly. But the ancients were probably making it up too. And this syncretism is such an important thing for this tradition that we're talking about and that we're looking at, right? This Solomonic figure takes prominence within this underground conflating, where the pagan, the Yahwist Hebrew, the Christian, the Mithraic, all of these, the Zoroaster, all of these underground religious traditions are coming together and creating new magical forms that become the Western occult mystery schools, right?
I mean, look at Dion's Transylvanian Red Dragon cult there. That's how,
Right?
how far through you can go with that one.
Exactly. You can find these connections all over. But let's continue here. So now this is an interesting picture. This comes from a reproduction of the Testament of Solomon, which is the text we're now going to get into. And I took this from the same translator, Philip A. Harland. Again, if anyone wants the source, I can send it to you. It's a phenomenal blog. I highly recommend everyone go check it out and read it if you're into these ancient Greek sources. So,
and if anyone would like to put the version of the pattern that I put on the Discord over that image, you'll find that it fits. I did it.
Almost certainly, right? Look at this guy.
No, it does. No, it definitely does. I did it today.
He's standing on the two stones as well. You got the stone standing on.
Yeah.
You got to have the stones.
And he's drawing down the stars, right? The sun and the moon, bringing them into himself.
Those winds. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful pic. So let's get into, before we begin, Phil Harland, he quotes 3 kingdoms, which is from the Greek Septuagint. And I wanted to include this because, again, it shows us more biblical magical imagery of where this Solomonic myth is coming from. So, Lord gave Solomon discernment, but the word they use in the Greek is very important. They use phronesis. This is a magical term and a philosophical term for understanding a specific type of discernment, of understanding the true nature, of seeing the ideal, right? Very great wisdom. Again, they use a magical word, a goddess name, Sophia. This isn't just wisdom. This is Sophia, knowledge of the goddess, of that wisdom as Sophia. And a volume of mind like the sand of the sea. Solomon greatly exceeded the discernment of all ancient men and all discerning men of Egypt. He was wise beyond all humans. He was wise beyond Gathan the Ezerate, Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol. Solomon uttered 3,000 parables and composed 5,000 songs, right? So this is what I was showing you guys earlier, So we'll get into this. Now we're into the main text. So there's a couple stories I wanted to show you. This story is one of the better ones. It's involving the spirit Ornias. And what it is Solomon is working on his temple, and he has people working on the temple. And a child gets possessed by a spirit while they're working on the temple, and Solomon has to get involved. So let's see, here it goes. When the temple of the city of Jerusalem was being built, and the builders were working on it, Ornias, the lower spirit, came among them toward sunset. He took away half the pay of the master workman's little boy, as well as half his food. He also continued to suck the right thumb of the boy every day, and the child grew thin, although he was very much loved by the king. So King Solomon called the boy one day and questioned him, saying, "Don't I love you more than all the artisans who are working in the temple of God? Don't I give you double wages and double supply of food? How is it that day after day and hour after hour you grow thinner?" But the child said to the king, "I ask you, O king, listen to what has happened to everything your child has. After we are all released from our work on the temple of God after sunset, when I lie down to rest, one of the evil lower spirits comes and takes away from me 1/2 of my pay and half of my food. Then he also takes hold of my right hand and sucks my thumb. And look, my soul is oppressed, and so my body gets thinner every day.
Can I just say, I was looking at what's his name, Esoterica, the Justin Sledge.
Justin Sledge.
Yeah, he was saying that it's not his right thumb at all. Demons wouldn't suck your essence from your right thumb. You can imagine what he's sucking essence out of.
I figured it was a phallic illusion. Wow.
Yeah.
And you know what? Another thing that's ironic with that too, if I'm pretty sure that Ornius is the demon in Testament of Solomon that has the hair. It's called disheveled hair. The certain style of weird snake hair.
Oh, interesting. Wild. Let's continue here. So it says, now when I, Solomon, heard this, I entered the temple of God and prayed with all my soul night and day that the lower spirits might be delivered into my hands and that I might gain authority over the lower spirit. And it came about through my prayer that a favor was given to me from the Lord Sabaoth by Michael, his archangel. He brought me a little ring, having a seal consisting of an engraved stone, and said to me, Solomon, king and son of David, take the gift which the Lord God has sent you, the highest Sabaoth. With the ring you will lock up all lower spirits of the earth, male and female, and with their help you will build up Jerusalem. You must wear this seal of God. I, Solomon, was overjoyed and praised and glorified the God of heaven and earth. And the next day I called the boy and gave him the ring and said to him, take this, and at the hour in which the lower spirit comes to you, throw this ring at the chest of the lower spirit and say to him, in the name of God, King Solomon calls you here. And then come running to me without having any misgivings or fears of what you may hear from the lower spirit. So we have that magical ring now, right? Gift from God in order to command the spirits. So the child took the ring and went off. It happened at the customary hour that Ornius, the fierce lower spirit, came like a burning fire to take the pay from the child. But the child, according to the instructions received from the king, threw the ring at the chest of the lower spirit and said, King Solomon calls you here. And then he ran off to the king. But the lower spirit yelled out loudly, saying, Child, why have you done this to me? Take the ring off me, and I will give you the gold of the earth. Only take this off me and refrain from leading me away to Solomon. But the child said to the lower spirit, As the Lord God of Israel lives, I will not allow you, so come here. And the child came at a run, rejoicing to the king, and said, I have brought the lower spirit, O king, as you commanded me, O my master. Notice that he stands before the gates of the court, your palace, crying out and supplicating with a loud voice. He is offering me the silver and gold of the earth, so that I would not deliver him to you. When I, Solomon, heard this, I rose up from my throne and went outside into the vestibule of the court of the palace. There I saw the lower spirit shuddering and trembling, and I said to him, Who are you? And the lower spirit answered, I am called Ornias. I said to him, Tell me, lower spirit, to what zodiacal sign are you subject? And he answered, In Aquarius. I strangled those who reside in Aquarius because of their passion for women, whose zodiacal sign is Virgo. But in case there is no disposition while in a trance, I am changed into 3 forms. Whenever men come to be enamored of women, I change myself into a beautiful woman. I take hold of the men in their sleep and play with them. And after a while, I again take to my wings and go to the heavenly regions. I also appear as a lion and am commanded by all the lower spirits. I am an offspring of the archangel Uriel, the power of God. Getting pretty wild here.
Do you remember what planet Uriel is?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Let's ask Shake Google. Uriel planet. What planet is Uriel?
Like Michael's Mars, Gabriel's Mercury. Must be like Saturn or something like that.
Uriel is one of the angels of the same 7 planets, namely Mars. All right, Mars. Okay. All right. The angel, Solomon, having heard the name of the archangel, prayed and glorified God, the Lord of heaven and earth. And I sealed the lower spirit and set him to work at stone cutting, so that he might cut the stones in the temple, which, lying along the shore, had been brought by way of the Arabian Sea. But he, fearful of the iron, continued and said to me, I ask you, King Solomon, let me go free, and I will bring you all the lower spirits. And as he was not willing to be subject to me, I asked the archangel Uriel to come and help me. And I immediately saw the archangel Uriel coming down to me from the heavens. The angel commanded sea monsters to arise out of the sea, and he withered up their species and cast his fate to the ground. He cast his destiny upon the ground, and that destiny made subject to him the great lower spirit. He commanded the great lower spirit in bold Orneus to cut stones at the temple, and to bring to completion the construction of the temple. So I, Solomon, glorified God of heaven and maker of the earth. He commanded Orneus come with his destiny, and gave him the seal, saying, Away with you, and bring me here the prince of all the lower spirits. So I thought this was wild because he cast his destiny upon the ground. The seal is also evocative of Solomon's destiny and his right as king. You know, there's all this stuff within the magic about that ascending the throne, embodying that power of the king, and commanding spirits as God. It's not only that are you invoking and thanking God, but you are becoming that God form, that deity, right? You're becoming that master and utilizing these powers over them because it is your destiny, you know? Just interesting. So now he invokes Beelzebub, the king of the spirits. And I thought this was interesting because that Beelzebub spirit is a really interesting spirit. You know, God of Akron. Often it's thought to be, in the Hebrew etymology, the Lord of Flies, right? And this connects us to the gadfly, to a lot of that drug mystery. But within a lot of the more Philistine studies, they connect it to the Lord of the high place, right? Baal Zebul, Lord of the high place, Lord of the mountain. So again, we're getting this sky deity, high of the god. One of the things that Ammon points out is that Beelzebub in the Greek, if you look at the Septuagint version, it seems to be akin to Ebulius. And Ebulius is an epithet for Dionysus used exclusively within the Eleusinian rites. And it means good counsel, the one who can guide you, who guides you through the rites, who takes you through the procession of the mystery. So this spirit Beelzebub seems to be this interesting combination of a bunch of different pagan forces coming in. This Elamite, Akronite, god of the high place, lord of the flies, and this Eleusinian, Dionysian wild magic type thing as well. All right, so let's continue here. So Orneus took the finger ring and went off to Beelzebul, who has kingship over the lower spirits. He said to him, Here, Solomon calls you. But Beelzebul, having heard, said to him, Tell me, who is this Solomon of whom you speak? Then Orneus threw the ring at the chest of Beelzebul, saying, Solomon the king calls you. But Beelzebul cried out with a loud voice and shouted a great burning flame of fire. And he arose and followed Orneus and came to Solomon. When I saw the prince of lower spirits, I glorified the Lord God, maker of heaven and earth, and said, Blessed are you, Lord God Almighty, who have given to Solomon your servant wisdom, the assessor of the wise, and have subjected to me all the power of the devil. I questioned him and said, Who are you? The lower spirit said, I am Beelzebul, the ruler of the lower spirits. I demanded that without interruption he sit next to me and explain the manifestation of the lower spirits. He promised to bring me in bonds all the uncleared spirits, and I again glorified the God of heaven and earth, as I do always, and give thanks to him. So the rest of the text, for most of the text, what happens is Solomon gets Beelzebub to summon various spirits, and they come parading before him, and they explain their power, and then Solomon binds them and uses them. So I selected a couple that I wanted us to look at that were kind of fun. So this one is going to be interesting. Ryan, you're going to get a kick out of this. This is the first female spirit that makes an appearance. says, I then asked the lower spirit whether there were females among them. When he told me that there were, I said that I desired to see them. So Beelzebul went off at a high speed and brought to me Ono Sikelis, that had a very pretty shape and a beautiful complexion, but her legs were those of a mule. So she had donkey legs.
Hairy legs again.
Yeah,
Right?
it's Queen Sheba. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Hairy legs. When she arrived, I said to her, tell me, who are you? But she said to me, my name is Ono Skelis. I am a spirit which has been made into a body. There is a golden cave where I lie, but I have a character that always shifts. At one time, I strangle men with the noose, which makes me think of the Sphinx. Because in the Greek, that word means to strangle.
Yeah, yeah.
At another,
Yep.
At another, I pervert them from their true natures. But my most frequent dwelling places are the precipices, caves, and ravines. However, often I consort with men in the form of a woman, and above all with those of honey-colored skin, for they share my star with me, since they privately or openly worship my star without knowing that they harm themselves. This merely whets my appetite for further mischief, for they wish to provide money by remembering me, but I supply a little to those who worship me fairly. I, Solomon, questioned her about her birth, and she replied, I was generated from an unexpected voice, which is called a voice of the echo of a black heaven. The echo of the black star, emitted in matter, drawing or dulling. For this interpretation, they say, so this is a compromise because there isn't really a direct transmission in the Greek. Emitted in matter, it could also mean to draw down, that magical act of drawing into the matter. And I said to her, under what star do you pass? And she answered me, under the star of the full moon, for the reason that the moon travels over most things. Then I said to her, and what angel is it that frustrates you? And she said to me, the one that reigns through you. And I thought that she was mocking me, and I commanded a soldier hit her. But she cried out loud and said, I am subjected to you, O king, by the wisdom of God given to you, and by the angel Joel. So I commanded her to spin the hemp for the ropes used in the building of the house of God. So when I had sealed and bound her, she was so overcome and brought to nothing as to stand night and day spinning hemp. Right? A sacred plant, spinning the hemp fibers to make the ropes. Wild stuff. And this is a physical demon, right? A lot of the spirits are just spirits, but this is in a body, right?
What's this golden cave that she has? That she's come from. She's an
so wild.
One. I'm getting Saturnian impulses from it. Like when she started describing things, it was just Saturn. But then.
So this next one is the most Saturnian one, and I chose it specifically for you. And this will be the last one that I'm going to read today. It's a lot of fun. So this is the demon Enepsigos. Okay, and there came before my face another spirit, as it were a woman in the form she had, but on her shoulders she had two other heads with hands. And I asked her, and so she's a trimorphos, three-headed with three sets of hands. Said,
We've
tell
all
me,
been out with someone like that, Snappy. Sorry.
Tell me, who are you? And she said to me, I am Enepsigos, who also have a myriad of names. I have many names. And I said to her, but what angel are you frustrated? But she said to me, what do you seek? What are you asking? I undergo changes. Like the goddess I am called, and I change again and pass into another shape. So do not expect to know everything about me. But since you are before me at this point, listen, I have my abode in the moon. And for that reason, I possess three forms. At times, the wise use Magian skill to invoke me as Kronos. At other times, in connection with those who bring me down, again, they're using this drawing down of the stars, I come down and appear in another shape. The measure of the elements, that Saturnian cutting, is inexplicable and indefinable and not to be frustrated. I then, changing into these three forms, come down and become such as you see me. but I am frustrated by the angel Raphanael, who sits in the third heaven. This is then why I speak to you. That temple over there cannot contain me.
This Rathan, I'm sure Dion said a name something like that, and I've read it something like that twice. I think one of the brothers or one of the sons of Solomon had a similar name, and there's a demon at the bottom of that mountain that the bird is at the top of that had a similar name. There's just seems to be repeating motif, that name, something like that.
There was that what was the name of Solomon's brother, Dion? Do you remember?
Oh, his brother is Adonijah.
Mm.
The name I said was Rahab,
Rahab, that's
R-A-H-A-B,
right, yeah.
and she
That
put
sounds-
the rope out the window.
It sounds like a star. That it sounds like an Arabic name for a star.
Wow. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. So those were the main sources that we have for the mythology in the early years for that Solomonic magical tradition. And I wanted to show you guys how much we get. Like, that's a 2nd century. Some people put it to a 1st century AD text. Very early Christian, late Jewish text. But already we're having Solomon binding demons, utilizing his magic ring and utilizing seals in the earth. And we're already getting some of those later names that will become that European grimoire tradition, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Wild.
you could almost do as many episodes on this stuff as you could for the Dragon's Tongue, even though this also feels like a Dragon's Tongue episode, weirdly. But
It's all connected. It's all connected, right? Solomon is a dragon. He builds the temple. What does the dragon do? They build the foundation. They're temple guardians, temple builders, right?
Well, my friends, I'm going to have to take off now. It had a beautiful time. Anybody out there watching, like and subscribe and share, because this is getting juicier with each episode.
Amazing. Dion, do you have anything else you want to leave the audience with for Solomon?
Oh, cut the baby in half. Let's see what happens.
Yay!
And we'll be back next week where we're going to dive more into King Solomon. We'll bring you some more interrelated myths. We're going to dive into the Freemasons. We're going to get into some of the Rosicrucian, Templar stuff, grimoires, all these weird related stuff. But we had to start with that key image of the central magician in the Christian magical tradition and the Jewish magical tradition, which is Solomon. Ryan, any words you want to end with? Anything you want to say about King Solomon?
I was about to say that we could do another episode on this quite easily, but you just announced that we will do one. So, yeah. So I must say, the week after, I won't be here. I'm going to go and do my friends, around the corner. But I will be doing an episode, everybody out there, just be in the studio with my friends in my local town. But I look forward to seeing you two guys again next week.
All right. Amazing. Well, this was beautiful, guys. Again, like and subscribe and tune in next time for more Occult Explorers. Thank you all for joining us. Take care.
Ciao.
Ciao for now.